All right. Well, I doubt we're going to solve for staffing. Education stuff. I have no idea why I even made slides, because like we're all sitting in this nice group and then they're over there. The whole thing is dumb. But I'm going to use them just to kind of keep myself on track. No, you don't need to turn around and join. Fear not. They're just going to help. We will turn around like what?
You can stand at the podium.
I could, but the microphone is so loud. So I just, I was having a little conversation with people who came in at first, but this has been such a special part of my career, and I've enjoyed working with you guys so much, and I've enjoyed distilling the wisdom of a group of senior educators into this course so much. And I am really sad that this is our final session. I totally understand the reasons why the board made that decision. There were definitely enrollment issues. But emotionally, I wish I could still hang out with you guys for 3 hours every month, because it's super fun and you guys have been so engaged and so great. So this is our final session, but again, like I've said many times before, it doesn't need to be goodbye. I remain personally available to any of you who want career advice about educational projects, advice about educational problems, who just want to hang out on Zoom and have a glass of wine, like whatever works. I am around, and the initial vision of this was that we would sort of create an educator community within SAEM of people we could collaborate with and rely on for mentorship, or just bouncing ideas off of at the peer level or whatever. So I hope you guys will stay in touch with each other again with me. So we're going to say farewell and not goodbye. And look, you do have to look at that. Yeah, it's our swan song, and the swans are sad and making a little heart with their heads. Okay, so what I was going to do with us today, and I showed this, I think, in our last session as well, is we were just going to have a little roundtable discussion of some hot topics. I was going to put together a talk, and then I was like, you guys have heard me talk so much this year. You don't need that again. I thought it would just be really interesting to talk about some of the sort of emerging topics and see how they're playing out in our own professional lives and how we're handling them in our respective institutions. Much like we all handle scheduling differently, I bet we're going to have some different insights about things that are happening in that.
I'm sorry to interject. We're recording everything. If you want to use a microphone, can I hand you one?
I don't think
they require all the microphones for all the meetings. I can just put one on the table. Maybe that would help.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
So we're going to start off with that. Then I want to hear from you guys, a little update on your projects, or your maybe shifts in your projects, or what you've learned this year, what roadblocks you've run into. I just kind of want to hear how things are going with you. We'll take a little break. Wendy Coates is going to do a keynote for us about precision medical education, which I'm very excited to hear. So she's going to come do that at 10. And then since people, when we polled about kind of how to use this time, people wanted to do some, networking and mentorship, which, we're arguably doing right this minute as well. But we have Armed Med Ed right next door. And they were doing literally the same thing in their last hour, and we were like stealing panel members from each other and stuff. So we talked about it and decided we would just join forces. So we're going to go over there and hang with them, and they've got a panel of senior educators. They have a little bit more of a research focus, but they're all people who are engaged in education at a high level, who are like offering words of wisdom, and then they're doing some mingling and greeting and stuff. So I think it'll work nicely for us to join up with them and get to know their participants. Thank you.
Should pick you up if we just get it kind of close.
Okay, great. Thanks. I guarantee nobody is going to want to listen to this session afterwards, but now it will be there for us in perpetuity. It'll join all the AI algorithms that we'll talk about. All right. So does that sound like a good session for us? Absolutely. Okay. So let's talk med ed hot topics. So I wanted to start off with competency-based medical education, which is like a set of words that all of us say, and we break it down to CBME, so we really sound like we're super familiar with it. But talking about it is a lot easier than doing it in practice, right? So the concept makes a lot of sense that rather than a time-based paradigm where it takes 4 years of residency to learn emergency medicine, you have a competency-based paradigm where you have specific knowledge, skills, attitudes, et cetera, that your learners are supposed to master, and they are done when they master those things. Now, logistically, that doesn't make any sense because we all have to keep our hospitals open. We have to fill our schedules. We get our funding from HCFA in years, not in skills mastered, right? So there's a lot of barriers to that are purely logistical, but I think there are a lot of barriers to that are pedagogical as well. So this is supposed to be the future of medical education. It's supposed to be the direction that all of us are going. ACGME, the AAMC, everybody is all about CBME all the time. And the public is actually in support of this as well, in as much as the public knows anything about medical education, because the idea that my doctor knows how to do this set of 100 things really well is more appealing to a patient than my doctor showed up and, had adequate attendance for 4 years, right? So this is something that it's a nut that we're all gonna have to crack, but how we do it is really tough. So I wanted to just do a case, and these are all like cases from my own institution and life that I just kind of like anonymized and fictionalized a little bit. So you've got a PGY3 resident. We've all probably had this resident. Like when you talk about the resident at faculty meeting, people are like, oh, I'm a little worried about this guy, but they have a really hard time articulating what the issue is. So you look at the comments in the evaluations, and you're about to, if you're pegging your evaluations, Claire, to your bonuses and requiring a completion threshold, you're about to see a very high noise to signal ratio.
A lot of click boxes.
Yeah, because people are going to click through as fast as they can and write some crap that may or may not make any sense or elucidate anything.
Lower third.
So this is going to be your problem. So they say things like, broaden your differentials. When you have complex patients, develop a problem list. Explain your reasoning better. And then my favorite are the bottom two, the classic contradictory comments. You should be more confident and really own your plans, or don't be so confident when you don't know what you're talking about, right? So you get both of these pieces of feedback for this resident. So what is going on with this resident, and could competency-based medical education, if we were able to do it better, help us with this problem? What do you guys think?
Say first, the faculty needs some training and assessment.
Right. But we're not going to diagnose the faculty right now. Like, we live in the world we live in. We have to decode their gobbledygook into some kind of plan for this poor resident, right? Now, maybe the CCC will talk about this resident and have a more rational conversation about them, but you've got a problem that you haven't put your finger on. So what might be going on?
Quick question, is this a 3 or 4 year program?
Oh, this is we'll say it's a 4-year program.
Okay.
I think having like competency-based medical education gives you like targeted goals. So like it almost turns into like a multiple choice question, right? If your faculty are just like giving you this vague stuff, if you can give them like, well, pick from these problems, like where is the problem, then you can kind of target it down, I guess.
Okay, so might help if we had better defined competencies. Yeah. We might have a better sense of which one this learner isn't doing.
Yeah, because I think sometimes you like can look at those and be like, oh yeah, this one, this is what they need to do.
Yeah. Okay, what do others think?
I think if you look at the current competencies and then try to match them up, it is very difficult to kind of figure out exactly where a particular resident isn't meeting expectations, especially for a frontline faculty member, because as somebody who sits on CCC and has to read through these and is not a program director or anything like that, there's a lot of words that I'm not really sure what it means. Right. And then you're trying to connect like a shift that you like a shift that maybe they didn't come up with a proper differential or something like that, and trying to match them is hard to do after a shift and also to do retroactively.
Because it wasn't like you spent that shift just watching that learner,
Yeah.
right? You spent that shift like being interrupted every 18 seconds by your phone and signing EKGs. You ran back to critical care 16 times. You saw the intern's patients as well. Odds are you were sleep deprived. It happened in the middle of the night. You didn't eat, drink, or pee the entire time. Like, there are a lot of barriers to you being analytical about this resident's needs.
And I think I struggle with the concept of just in our care space and how we provide care doing this compared to like if you look at a surgeon doing a gallbladder removal. Like they sit there and they watch the resident do the gallbladder and you're like, oh yeah, you did it right. But like, how do you how do you connect this with that and put it all together?
The competency that people are uncomfortable with here is sort of demonstrates appropriate clinical reasoning, which is not a competency, it's a concept and it's vague. And it's really hard to wrap your head around, whereas takes the gallbladder out without killing the patient is objectively observable, right? The gallbladder is out, the patient is alive, they win. It's a lot harder when you're thinking about cognitive competencies. So
I love there's a disconnect in knowledge between like the person reading these comments and then the learner. Right? Like, if you're reading these comments, you're saying this is a struggling learner. It sounds like someone who is maybe not keeping up with his PGY3 peers, but is not like necessarily declaring need for remediation. But if you're the learner, you're like, hey, it looks like I'm doing fine. Right? You know, if they want me to broaden my differential.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll work on that.
I should be more confident. Well,
except when I'm too confident.
You know, like screw the faculty, whatever. You know.
You're wrong.
And it seems like I'm doing well. So there's like a pretty big divide between reality and what the learner sees here, which means like they don't even know that there's a problem they need to address.
So that is a really great point, because one of the elements of CBME has to be coaching for the learner, right? Like, one piece is identifying the competencies. One piece is measuring those competencies some kind of way, and we tend to be very bad at doing that. And then another one is sending that information back to the learner, helping them come up with a plan for how to progress from not competent at the beginning to competent at the end, right? And if this is what the learner's seeing, you're absolutely right. Is this going to help them do anything better, differently? No. So how could we use CBME to solve this problem, or could we?
I think going to the first question, though, I don't even know what the real problem is.
Bingo.
You know, like, if I was the learner or the faculty member, I have literally no idea what to tell them or what to do if it was me.
And one of the problems is that this construct of clinical...
Yeah, it's about me. This is my evaluation.
Dude, this totally could have been me back in the day.
Clinical reasoning's a difficult one, too.
It was a resident we're actually doing.
Patient care, medical knowledge, like practice-based learning and improvement. It's really like a mix of...
Exactly. So the issue, to answer the first question, is you don't know what the problem is, because clinical reasoning is a complex construct, and there's a lot of competencies that go into it. So, you know, garbage in, garbage out. Maybe they're gathering crappy data because their history-taking skills aren't good, or they're not establishing rapport with the patient in a way that the patient wants to partner with them to give them the information they need. Maybe they're getting the information just fine, but they lack the medical knowledge to synthesize that into a differential diagnosis. Maybe they're coming up with a differential diagnosis, but again, they're having trouble taking the leap from that to a plan, or they are doing it in a rote way, right, where they've learned that like chest pain gets you troponins and belly pain gets you a CT, but they're not really connecting the dots. So there's a lot of potential places where this could go wrong for this person, right? And none of these comments help you figure out which place that is.
This feels very similar to our recent discussion on like the ILPs for all residents instead of just the stroke. So I don't know, I feel like I'm drawing a lot of like parallels there. I don't know, I just want to say that.
I really like your gallbladder point here, because like surgeons don't sometimes take the gallbladder out via the left lower quadrant and sometimes via the right upper like, no, there's a way that they do it.
Yeah.
Right? And you either do it correctly or you don't, whereas our field is maybe a little different. Like, our interns struggle with, yesterday this person was discharged, today we're going to dine with them. The next attending is going to like admit for serial CTPAs. I don't even know the rules.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing for them to even figure out the rules because we're teaching them 50 different ways to take out the gallbladder.
Right.
Yeah. And we're telling them, use your clinical judgment, but also use these scoring tools. And that clinical judgment is wrong.
And the clinical judgment of one attending and another attending and third attending may all be different, and you should pick one of those to emulate, except when you're with me, it should be mine, right? I mean, you raise a great point. It's really tough. So is CBME the hammer for this nail? Like, can you?
I think also, though, it's the way that we see patients in the emergency department of like, you go see a patient and you present it. We don't actually see a lot of their like history taking, their physical exam, how they talk to patients, all these things that we're apparently judging them on. We just know when we come back in and I'm like, hey, what did they tell you? And they're like, well, I don't know. Like, you know? And
That's
so
a
then I
great
assume that they
point.
didn't tell them anything.
Like, probably none of these people who wrote these things went to the bedside at all. And in as much as they were directly observing the learner doing anything, it was the whole presentation. It's kind of washing over them because the presentation is a complex construct too, right? And at the end, they're like, I don't know, I don't feel good about this. But they're not really homing in on any particular piece of that equation. They're not going to the bedside. They're not saying, okay, you've presented these data, put that into a differential and explain it to me, right? They're kind of like, we're all just trying to get to the next patient. So we're like, what's your plan? Does it make some degree of rational sense? Let's move on. And that's where I think CBME can be helpful, because the idea is that it forces you to break things down a little bit more and diagnose the specific competencies where your learner is struggling. So it forces you to go to the bedside if you have to sign off that this person is taking a rational history. If they're focusing on, differential diagnosis skills, it lets you home in on that and maybe not worry as much about the other pieces and just be like, okay, you've talked to the patient, I've talked to the patient, give me your differential and explain it. And when you narrow things down, it becomes so much easier, right, to identify, oh, this is where it's not going well.
I had an attending in training who would see the patient before after I saw them, or but before I presented, he wouldn't tell you. And then, then he'd ask you questions. And then I felt like, obviously if you're chasing after a PA and a resident, or 3 residents or whatever, you don't always have time to do that. But I found that when he did that, it was really valuable, because he could see okay, well, these are the questions I asked. This is the piece that's missing. You should have asked X, Y, and Z. And then you can kind of talk about how we kind of came through that. But again, you can't always do that if you're on a busy shift.
Right.
So I also, I like the concept of CBME. I like that we're getting more, hopefully better data than just vague, do better feedback.
We should all do better.
I think there's, at the same time, I think there's still a really strong role for a mentor to help interpret this. So even if I get all this stuff back that's just saying, I'm here, I need to be here on this domain, but I'm doing okay in this domain, and all these are more practical skills for me, that's better than some of the other feedback we talked about. But I still want someone to come and say, here's how you can do that. Because as a learner, I
100%.
I don't get anything actionable out of this.
Right.
Unless I have someone who could do that. And not all of our faculty who are put in a position to interpret that are really good at it. I read those comments and I'm banking on the fact that this resident is still working on rote kind of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's what I take away from this. But other faculty are probably not going to take away from it. And I've got ideas about how to move from parroting to interpreting and manipulating. I don't know that that's going to come through in CBME.
Right.
So I guess that's my hesitance in moving towards all this, is you're taking away kind of the experts in interpreting.
But one piece of CBME is that coaching piece, right? Collecting all the data in the world is useless if if it doesn't translate into an actionable plan for the learner. And that would be a really big burden to place on the learner, to be like, okay, now we've collected much more concrete data and you've got this big ass spreadsheet of it, figure it out. So I totally agree with you, but I think that's part of CBME, not antithetical to CBME.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're doing it correctly.
Yeah.
Is anybody doing it?
We actually just talked after our ILP discussion, starting in July, because up to this point, our ILPs have been basically like a self-assessment. They just, go through it. Their mentor sits down, like, work on these things. Now our ILPs are going to be very specific and structured to all of the competencies and subcompetencies. So they'll kind of get where they were ranked by the CCC the last time, and then with a mentor, develop an actionable, like, SMART objectives for each thing to move to the next level. So we'll see. We're starting in July.
Yeah, our post-shift evals
amazing.
are kind of linked. That is awesome. Our post-shift evals are kind of linked to the core competencies, and then so it has like a core competency, and then it like says from like a scale of 1 to 10, like 1 through 3 being like does not meet expectations, 4 through 6 it meets expectations, and then exceeds, and then attending level. So they try to kind of gauge that, but that's I feel like that's still very like.
Are the core competencies the right competencies? Because talk about broad.
That's also.
They're all important things, right? Like patient care, yes, I'm pro that. Medical knowledge, also pro.
Yes.
But they're so big. Like just.
I was gonna say that's like our issue because we like break it down, and so we have like a 1 through 5 evaluation, and like it breaks it down. But like under critical care, like I can have a critical care with like a resident, and they're 1 on like one of the sub things, and there are 5 on the other, and so I'm like, I don't know what to do with this.
Right.
So it's like, how do you, if you like go through every single like sub, you're like, these are way too broad, but also I am not gonna like I know I'm an educator, but I will also not be filling out an evaluation on 3 residents per shift of 20 questions. So.
Right.
Anybody use the EPAs?
We use the milestones in like 1 through 5.
And we used to, I think everybody was using milestones for a while, and then we were like, obviously faculty that don't have like very specific training and assessment shouldn't be doing that. So now
milestones are also a little bit of a hot mess because they have that same problem where they're like, does this and that? And I'm like, well, what if they do this and that, but not the other? Like, what circle? What thing do I circle?
Yeah, like as an ultrasound person, ultrasound got linked under like all radiology. So like, there's no like, can you perform an ultrasound? It's like, can you interpret any imaging? And I'm like, well, it's a lot. There's a lot going on there.
That is a chest. Done.
There's a lot going on there.
There are bones in the heart.
Yes.
My question is for the changes that they're doing in board certification, how they're changing the oral boards are now going to be this more hands-on situation. I feel like they're trying to get at competency-based medicine like that. I just think they should move it, if they're going to do that, move it to during residency, so you know if your resident is competent before they graduate, and you still have time to be able to intervene if they're not.
Or at least have like something analogous to the ITE, right?
Exactly.
That's like, because the ITE is designed to identify your knowledge gaps before graduation and pick out the people who are going to fail their boards.
Right.
So you need something like that.
Yeah.
Is anyone doing that?
I don't think
We're
they
struggling
even
to design
know.
one as a craft.
Yeah, how do you even design one?
We know you.
I don't think we know. I don't think the people doing it know what.
Yeah.
No, talk about vague.
And that's coming.
Yes, someone said that they still haven't developed the cases yet, or like haven't actually decided what they're gonna do, like and how they're evaluating, and you're like, or like what procedures are like fair game.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting. I'm very skeptical about how they're going to put that all together. But I think it's an interesting idea to try and get at that competency-based piece of it all.
Yeah.
Rather than like, because that seems what they're trying to do, which seems like it would be like kind of on this idea of are you competent, are you graduating competent residents, but
It has to be more applicable than like talking to a person on the other side of a folder in a hotel.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Like
I think it's going to be better, but I don't know how to bring that in.
Do you think it's going to be like the clinical skills before they got that away? Like,
yeah.
like
I think the focus though is different because they're trying to specifically pull out competencies that can't be tested on the IT. So it's like communication skills, professionalism, like breaking bad news. It's like all those like
Running a board,
kind of,
doing the procedure.
not really medical knowledge so much as like being a personable professional.
Which if you're trying to test competency at some point, like that feels more reasonable than sometimes trying to get an evaluation from a faculty who was watching 8 residents or 3 residents and is like overwhelmed and doesn't even know doesn't even read the click, click, click that they're doing. But
Yeah, I think it's interesting because as you describe this vision for the new board certification process, you actually are describing sort of breaking down pieces of a much bigger process, which is like being an emergency physician, into these little discrete units, right? Like, can you perform this procedure? Can you break bad news in a patient-centered manner, et cetera? And I think that's the part that we don't do at the bedside with learners. Like, talk about a 20-question evaluation for 3 people. Like, the human mind cannot parse that many dimensions of performance. Whereas if you say, today's assigned EPA or subcompetency or whatever framework you're using is, differential diagnosis, and you just focus on that and you only assess that, it becomes a totally different calculus, right? But then the problem becomes that everybody has to be assessed all the time on every shift, or else you don't get enough data to cover the breadth. I don't know.
And how do you get your frontline faculty to appropriately assess? Like going to your point, like the click boxes after like a busy shift, you're like, I got to do this because I got my bonus. But so how do you?
I do think that making
people?
It specific makes it easier, right? Because it allows it to be a shorter evaluation, which decreases the, click to freedom temptation. And also if the faculty knows from the get-go, this is all I need to pay attention. I mean, I have to pay attention to your patient care and keep your patients alive.
That's a really good point.
For you, we're just talking differential diagnosis today, nothing else. I don't have to think about your plans. I don't have to think about your data gathering. I don't have to think about your presentation skills or your charting. We just have to, when we're teaching, that's what we're going to be focused on. I think it does make the proposition a little bit easier, but it still takes training, right?
The proposition is
are your faculty all super excited about getting trained to assess better?
I think this week is for better or for worse, kind of changing the landscape. One thing I've heard in the weeks coming up to this is, whether we like it or not, this is where we're going. SAEM just gave the keynote speaker that this is the task, right? So, obviously SAEM is very pro CBME. The title is the promise of CBME, right? So,
how is that playing?
Fall into line with our national organization, we shall all swear by CBME, which is just an interesting, I'm not sure that was a deliberate message, but...
It wasn't, but you know what? It is kind of coming down on us from on high, right? So, it is definitely, there's pressure from ACGME. RRC is starting to look at, scrutinize the ways that this is being implemented in residency programs. LCME is doing the same at the medical student level. So I think it's not just that, our national organization says so. It's really the wave of the future. But what intrigues me is it's really freaking hard. And how are you going to do this with no extra resources, right?
That sounds like most of my job.
Well, maybe we should move on before we get depressed. But, I do think that for me, when I think about it, the promise is the ability to sort of drill down to more specific behaviors rather than the global gestalt of performance. And maybe in doing so, you can free faculty from the 20-question evaluation and get people to be a little bit more skillful in observing specific things rather than trying to parse what is this person's problem, which could be anything from knowledge to data gathering to reasoning to even communication, right? Maybe you just freak them out and they can't defend their plans to you because they're scared, right? There's so many possibilities.
I think that's where EPAs come into play too.
Yeah.
Because even the more novice assessor can do it pretty easily.
Yes.
It's just like, you trust them to do it or don't you?
Right.
Yes.
And it's,
One of the problems we ran into with EPAs, and I like it as an assessor, but one of the problems we ran into is a lot of the faculty, even if the resident did an amazing job, are never going to pick the I would let them do it independently because their philosophy is, well, they're residents. They're not supposed to be doing this independently. Why would I ever select that?
So that's where faculty training comes into play.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I see it, obviously, there's a graduated level of responsibility as they go through, and especially this time of year, the good third year that's about to graduate, I do try to be completely hands-off. So if I don't do anything to change their plan or their management, then they're independent.
I'm just wondering, so faculty-wide, are y'all hitting ceilings in, some faculty will just never assess high on an EPA?
We're a very small program, so there's only 25 to 30 faculty total, and it's a little bit easier to rein them in, I feel like. So I think that's probably part of it. The difficulty is now on the back end trying to figure out exactly where those go to the competencies. So each, if they are independent here, what does that equate to on the actual milestones?
Yeah.
And that's the work in progress.
If you're problem faculty members, you can just make them residents again.
Yeah.
There you go. Just get demoted. Just
But CBME, you unfortunately are.
make them work with the PAs, and your problem is solved.
We have
Educator milestones.
faculty that can't do ultrasounds, and the residents are like, well, they can't supervise it, but I'm competent on the ultrasounds.
Are all of your evaluations, our residents can see who does their evaluation of them, but the faculty don't see who evaluates?
That's how we do it too.
I think that's a rule,
That's like the
ACGME mandate.
That's an ACGME thing.
Yeah.
I was curious. That was a debate the other day too for people that, on the opposite for us, it's not that they can't be independent, but they don't ever want to score anybody low. Everyone gets the perfect score because they're nervous.
We have an option at the bottom that says I want to send a private message to the program.
We do too. Yeah. I really think that would be an important study to do, though, is what do you lose by having open evaluations? Because the bottom line is that when a resident comes to you or a med student or whatever and is why did you say this horrible thing about me? I mean, you feel bad. It's a punisher, right? It's like shocking the rat. You don't want to have that conversation with them. So it really discourages candor when residents have learning needs. And even when you phrase things really constructively and you're really thoughtful about how you provide that feedback, it can bite you.
We run into a situation of people just don't put anything in writing.
Yeah.
So then when you end up with a difficult resident who you really do need to hold back, there's actually nothing to hold them back.
Right.
Because but everybody knows. We all know.
Yeah.
So what do you do then? You're just stuck in this, how do you write it? Yeah. How do you write it down in a constructive way that doesn't punish the faculty member? Because in a small residency, all the residents will be pissed.
Right. Yeah, and then if you get the reputation for being the hard ass, you've got to come in and work with these people day and night, and run the team, and it impairs your relationships. It's really tough.
Your relationships, impairs your ability to get promoted.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because then they trash you on your evaluations.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad we solved that.
I was going to say I think our coordinator, before releasing the faculty evaluations of residents, she kind of goes through them and basically is if someone if a resident completely gets trashed, she can take the name off the evaluation, so technically it becomes anonymous, because that happened, and then it took us a while to figure out who was this person who trashed this resident.
To be trashing people, but just the ability to give feedback in general.
Yeah, nobody should be trashing anyone, but I've found that even the most carefully constructed, thoughtful feedback can go amiss if the resident doesn't believe you, doesn't like you, doesn't want to hear it. Exactly. Well, I had planned to do like 4 15-minute hot topics. Clearly, we spent 45 minutes on this one, so it's a big deal.
We like
I
to
did.
talk.
I could talk to you guys all day, and we can do more of this too. Like, we don't need to spend a huge amount of time on projects, but I did also want to kind of switch gears and talk about bias. I don't think I need to convince you of explain what bias is or why it's bad. But I have another case, another real one. This is a senior medical student doing her sub-internship in emergency medicine, and her assessment scores are all over the place. She gets these really laudatory comments like strong differential diagnoses, she's confident, she's poised, she's articulate, she advocates for her patients, and then other people are like, she's argumentative, she's strident, she's not open to other perspectives, and her numeric scores reflect that, right? So you've got this woman who some people love and some people hate, and you're sitting with her in your office for her mid-clerkship feedback session. What are you going to say to her?
So I'll say, for me, prep. So I do a lot of the UME stuff, and preparation for this meeting has really helped me a ton. So if I have the time to notice that this is coming, and I'm not doing this like preparing at 7 a.m. for an 8 a.m. meeting, if I can call a couple of faculty that had both ends of the spectrum,
Yes.
and just say, what were your thoughts about a student? And then I want to let you know, half the faculty loved them, half the faculty hated them. Why do you think that is? And pose that question to both someone that rated them low and someone that rated them high. I can get a much better picture of what's going on. So a lot of times the faculty who loved them still have some insight into why someone might really not mesh well with this person.
Sure.
And vice versa. So that's been helpful for me in coming to that meeting with constructive feedback.
That's a really great point because, again, like these comments are little, whatever, like 15-word bullets, and you can have a much more nuanced conversation when you actually talk to people about it.
I would also say, again, faculty are the problem here because it's a lot of subjective things and what objective, like what did a specific encounter, specific observation, not she needs to work on being open to perspectives, like what exactly happened.
Right.
I also want to reassure myself that when we're going to have this discussion about specific behaviors and things, that the same feedback would also be given to a male learner with this. So that's my other motive in trying to talk to people ahead of time.
So I was going to ask that exact question, like, is there evidence of bias here?
The words that are used are interesting because they seem to be some of the bias words, like the articulate and poised sometimes kind of comes off differently depending on gender and different backgrounds and things, and so I think that there are a lot of bias words, and nothing is objective, it's all subjective.
And strident is a very, it's a classic female pejorative word, right? Yeah. So there is, you start to look at the coded language here and wonder.
Yeah.
So is this something you guys have seen in your institutions? How much of this do you think reflects sort of legitimate differences in perspective based on personality and style, and how much of it reflects gender bias?
We were doing for a little while running some of our evaluations through the, there's a gender bias thing online, and you can run the words through it, and it'll pick out some of the different words. And we were doing that for a little while, which I thought was interesting. I don't know what they were doing with it, but I just know they were using it at some point.
That's actually really cool, and especially, I don't know if doing it, for day-to-day evaluations is feasible, but when you're writing letters, your SLOs, your letters of recommendation for residents looking for jobs, your referee letters as you move up in your career for faculty promotion, very good idea to use those kinds of tools and make sure that you're not coding gender bias or any other bias.
I think that, as a woman, it's hard because I initially read this and I was like, I feel like this is because she's a woman. And then I was like, no, it's not. Like, you're thinking that because you're sensitive to it. So I almost like gaslit myself to being like, no, they would say this about a man too. So it's just interesting because I think it goes both ways. Like, you have to check yourself because you do get the women in medicine who are like, well, I went through this, so now you have to go through it too. And you have to be careful not to be one of those people.
You got the other end of the problem too, which is kind of what we have at my institution, where like if I were to write that in an evaluation, I'd expect it to be done from my chair.
Really?
That-
For which comment?
Like Strident.
Yeah.
That, so almost all of our evaluations are extremely positive.
Yeah.
It's like, not an ounce of bias because everyone is amazing.
Yeah.
And our clerkship director has an impossible job of being like, so everyone gets honors every block. Great, you know?
Yeah, and that's its own problem, right? Like, that's not the solution to bias.
So, like, for example, if I have a female resident or a female student who truly is like acting in a way that may be arrogant or beyond her level of training, that's almost impossible for me to do anything. Right, and that's unfortunate for the learner because like I want to be able to help her, but I can't put that in writing.
So that's interesting. Is that true for men as well?
We've had it with a variety of different situations, and it makes our evaluation, like I feel so bad for our clerkship director because she has the worst job in the
Well,
world.
it's interesting to say that because, like, I know, so I'm actually leaving where I work now. I made that decision like 2 weeks ago.
Oh my gosh! Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
Okay,
yes,
good.
yeah, I accepted the position. I'm going to be the new ultrasound fellowship director at Julianna Care.
Oh, nice.
You're gonna be my neighbor.
Yeah, I know. Well, one of our hospitals is in Maryland, so I have to get a Maryland license.
See?
Yeah.
Fantastic. We should like go to Longwood Gardens together.
Yes. Yeah, I'm looking to move right near there. But yeah, so very exciting. So everything's with a grain of salt because I don't know what they do, come September, what I'll be doing. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, so right now I currently work at Lehigh Valley and we're associated with PCOM and PCOM students literally would tell each other like not to rotate at us because our course director had like notoriously difficult slows and nobody got high honors, so and that got around like and we had difficulty getting people from PCOM to come rotate with us like for that reason. But at the same time, like you knew you were getting an honest evaluation. Like if you had a good slow from us, like people were like, oh, they're really good. But it was very hard to do well for a long time.
Our clerkship director emails people who give really bad evaluations and really good evaluations to basically be like, give me your specific scenarios about both of them. And sometimes they're warranted, or she'll move around and switch like a shift, so like one of the residency leadership or her will actually work with that student to basically be like, if you're getting multiple, we had like 2 or 3 students this past year who like, they were like very, very bad to the point where like all of us were texting each other and we're like, is this a one-off? To basically be like, how do you put that constructively, but also when you have to like meet with this person, how do you put that constructively without also like, here's how you can do better, but also you're not. But like also with slows, like you can't, like it's their future, so you can't say that you're really bad. So that was like the other thing that we were having issues with too.
Yeah.
One good thing about slows, on the other hand, is that prior to that, it was just everybody had glowing letters of recommendation that who could write the best.
Yeah.
Now you have to specifically say, I gave this many of this category.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can judge if 90% got top 10%, then that slow doesn't mean as much as one more honest one.
Although, so a devil's advocate position about that, back to competency-based medical education, if you define your competencies and all of your learners achieve them, what are you doing with top third, middle third, bottom third? Like, what does that even mean?
And how many people, like how many times have you guys checked the lower third, like on evaluations? Like statistically speaking, it should be a third of people, but I feel like
it's 4%.
Very rarely, exactly.
It was studied. There was a paper. It's 4%.
Exactly. And I try to be like mindful of that because we do like bottom third, whatever. And I'm like, well, like if you're meeting expectations, like that's average. Yeah. But like we've all been conditioned to think like, oh, average is bad.
Right.
Like, we all have to excel, and but like statistically speaking, you can't do that.
But yeah, like an average medical student who's achieved all of their competencies and, done fine in medical school, like that's an exceptional individual by any other standard. Yet here we are trying to, read the coded language and figure out, are they secretly better than this other student?
Maybe we need a top 0.01%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The most bestest
Yeah.
The
Best student
pinnacle.
I've ever worked with in my career.
I'll just say, how often you guys read the SLOs? Then
Yeah, you're like-
people write that. They write like top medical student this year, or someone like one of the top medical students. Well, it's only one of the top medical students.
How many
I
top
know.
were there?
Oh, yeah.
Or you read the like written part and it completely is completely opposite of like what the boxes they check. They're like, well, you said you were top third, but like this is they were late to half of their shifts and like it's weird when there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Or like you rate like 2 and something on like the things, but then like you're in the top third, like I'm confused about how that correlates, and there's nothing written in this section about explaining it.
Right. We could talk about slows forever. But thinking about bias again, I'm just curious, like how you guys are handling this, if you're handling it, because this case is pretty classic, right? It's very hard to tell if this learner actually maybe has a little bit of an attitude problem or a problem in how she expresses herself, maybe under stress or when maybe she becomes defensive when questioned. There's like lots of reasons why she could appear this way to some people and not others. But we also know, there's such a huge body of literature that women get trashed in assessments for all kinds of things that have nothing to do with performance. So women systematically score higher as early learners when they're sort of like young and fresh and non-threatening. And then as they mature, are much more likely to get the overconfident and strident comments, and they lag behind their male peers and never catch back up at the end. We know that these kinds of language terms are used all the time for women. So it's likely that both are true, right? That maybe she's had some problematic behaviors, and maybe she's also being judged differently for those behaviors because she's a woman. Like maybe a man, it would be like, well, he was a little overconfident, but you need to really stand your ground in emergency medicine, so it's cool, right? Whereas like girlfriend is strident. So how do you deal with that? Have you guys had any discussion among your faculty or any plans for sort of addressing bias? And I picked gender, but same is true of race, same is true of disability, same is true of sex and gender, or gender minority or sexual orientation issues, and even just sort of personality types, right? Like if you tend to be a quieter person and you're working with an extreme extrovert who thinks everybody in emergency medicine needs to be running around yelling all the time, like that can bite you in the butt just because they don't think you're like fitting the stereotype of the field. So how do you deal with that?
I think depending on, obviously each situation is unique. Obviously, again, there's some faculty development that needs to take place first and foremost, and most importantly. But I think it's also a disservice, especially in this case, if you don't tell the woman how she's being perceived. Not saying change it, not saying you're wrong, say it's bias, which it is, but also say, unfortunately, that's the world we live in, and until we can change it and make it better, have a understanding of how you're perceived.
But the problem is that she's getting conflicting, like this is a 50-50 split, like 2 comments are laudatory and 2 comments are damning. So how does she even figure out, like, do I titrate my behavior to the listener? Like how do you do that when you're getting, and that's actually much more common for women as well to receive this type of conflicting feedback.
It'd be interesting to see who wrote each of those things.
Right.
Was it an old white man that wrote both of the negative things and young, successful women that wrote the positive? Or
Although, fun fact, women are actually just as sexist as men because we are all acculturated to the same society. So women actually can be harder on other women.
Instead of doing like text boxes, would there be a way to like put
like the 4 same terms to describe someone for both the male and female checklist, say like confident, overconfident, or like not necessarily like ranking system, but 4 words. How would you describe the student with 4 different personality traits? And you keep the same personality traits for male and female. And then you could put a none of the above or a comment box below, which is why. So it's less.
Actual terminology, like the.
Yeah, you're like
Less of a choice,
removing at
like-
least some of the freedom
There's no
to say
starting
crazy
option.
things.
Yeah,
right?
It's less like sexist terms, I guess, but
Yeah, I was thinking of like a list of adjectives you could.
like what you do when you fill out those things for a job application. Like, how would you describe yourself?
Well, that kind of goes back to CBME as well, right? Like you talked about removing the degrees of freedom and being like, you know, here are some competencies that may go into a problem in this domain. Which one of these is the problem? So rather than people trying to like a priori or, you know, independently just diagnose what's going on, you remove some of the subjectivity by limiting their choices.
I wonder if there's an ability, like I understand you have to give some kind of feedback, but I don't know if this is a mid-course feedback versus final, maybe waiting and kind of gathering a little bit more information, because I think you're tied 50-50, and probably there's some degree of truth to all of these comments somehow.
I mean, I think what Jeff said about like reaching out to the people who, and like getting a little bit more background, I feel like that's like, again, everything takes time, but I feel like that, yeah, again, you can kind of vet, okay, who is this coming from? What was the situation? You know, maybe this person does really well in routine situations, but like as soon as there's a critical patient, they get flustered and they start yelling, like, you know, so maybe like, there's a little bit of background.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I get tasked with a lot of the mid-course assessments for our med student courses, and I actually much prefer that to giving someone like final formative feedback, because, or summative feedback. So I can always couch it as, I really want you to succeed in this course. Here's what the assessments are saying. So here's like my plan of action for you to really tackle this. I mean, that doesn't tackle this issue. I think we're kind of getting off that, but that's been kind of my cheat code to make it a less contentious interaction. It's like, I want to talk to you about how you're going to move to high pass or move to honors in the next 2 weeks. That's really easy for me to say though, in a mid-course assessment.
Yeah.
How do you even, because I haven't had one of these conversations yet, how do you even like go about basically being like, some people think you're great and some people think you're not so great, like, and like, how do you even like go about that? Because if someone gave me this, I would probably become a little bit defensive a little bit. Like as much as I wouldn't want to, I would probably more or less become a little defensive, but how do you even like do that in a more constructive manner?
I mean, behaviorally, if we're going to go back to the rats, right, this is like learned helplessness. This is like the rat gets shocked no matter what they do. Because they have no way of knowing who's going to perceive them how. So they then just become afraid to do anything, right? Which is not what you want for this poor learner.
If it was like a checklist where they select terms, what if it was like 50% of the professors or preceptors ranked you this, rather than one evaluation? It's an average of all the evaluations put together at your assessments. You can actually see like 75% of people ranked you this versus one person.
But, you know, obviously I just put a couple bullets up here. But say it's 50-50. You know?
And considering the source, once again, like is it 50% people that don't have experience in assessment are clinical faculty versus 50% that are leadership and have been through these courses and know things, then...
Yeah, if there's a demographic difference too, like maybe you just say, you know what, old white dudes don't like you. I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious, but I mean, part of navigating the world is understanding that you're going to hit different with different people, right? And, you know, maybe this learner would benefit from moderating her behavior a little bit to the audience. However, is that fair to her, right? Like, should she be like, oh, well, I live in a sexist world, so I'm just gonna dumb it down for the dudes, right? Like, that's not a really positive message.
Because the value of diversity, though, is that you have different people from different backgrounds. Everyone shouldn't be all the same. So, like, if she's now having to be like, well, I have to, like, tailor myself to, like, what this person wants from me, like, that's also not. Because they might, I mean, it might even be that, like, yeah, I don't know, if that person doesn't fit with half your faculty, like maybe it's just not a good fit for them also, right? Like, at what point do you say, well, maybe this person just actually doesn't fit with our group, and is it biased or is it actually just true feedback on like maybe you don't fit? I don't know.
So I think maybe it's one of the things that I've kind of struggled with is on the one hand, I really want to be assessing people on kind of medical competencies.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that our residents are going to be going and working somewhere, and a lot of our job depends on being able to form relationships with your nurses, with your consultants, with your admitting docs. And so I've personally struggled with how much of that like interpersonal relationship stuff do I talk to learners about?
Yeah.
And I don't know the answer. I'm very open to anything that.
Yeah, no, I don't either.
I think a lot of our job is interpersonal. Like,
Yeah.
Right, the medicine
Yeah, so
becomes
much of
less
it.
hard.
Yeah, like if you're fighting with the hospitalist to admit every single patient, like your patient care is also suffering, and you're probably spending way too much time on the phone. Therefore, you're slower. Therefore, you're not like being as productive. Therefore, the department is suffering. Like there's all these other compounding factors with that.
Like our VA site, the nurses either love you or they.
Yeah.
That's right, that's right.
And it makes or breaks your experience. Like,
Yeah.
and the docs therefore either love the VA or hate the VA.
Yeah.
And so how do I coach someone to succeed when they leave, like, you know, the nice, comfy, like, cozy environment of residency where everyone expects you to be a learner, and then coach you to, like, excel in that environment months from now? Because I'm not going to be able to change that environment.
Right,
Yeah.
Well, I love your point about the feedback being like to help them.
Yeah.
Because that kind of couches everything in the safe learning environment. And that I agree, like so much of our job, if you're going to walk into a patient room and you have 6 seconds to either establish that rapport or not, and that feedback, although at times can be weird, it is actually helpful if you're going into our field. Like, so I'll share a personal example which struck me as like, what does that even mean? I had an attending tell me when I was at PGY2 that she thought I came off as, her words, an exceptionally straight male.
What? That's biased.
I was like, I don't even know what to make of that.
Is that a problem?
Well, I don't know. What she's trying to do is like tell me that was the way I came off, and I was like,
What do I do with that information?
I don't know what to say about, but I'm thankful that you pointed it out because, like, I guess that crosses some people's mind. Like, oh, sure. And
That's such a weird thing to
it's
say.
a weird thing to say to a resident, but at the same time, like, that I still remember that, and
Well, what do you do about it? You can't change how you, like,
no, but
Like,
maybe
that's
it
your-
means that like when I'm interacting with someone who might have an issue with that demographic, I'm more aware. I don't know how, but obviously it's stuck around in my head for 5 years.
And you still haven't really parsed what to do with it, have you?
Yeah, you're still saying, well, maybe it means not good feedback.
So we've had a lot of discussion on the sort of learner side of this. What about the faculty side of this? What do you do with your faculty who are writing this stuff down? I mean, you mentioned that like you'd get an email from your chair being like, don't do that. But you know, is just inhibiting faculty speech the way to go? Like, we, you know, just like every other program, we have issues at our institution with gender bias in assessment. And I actually led the first faculty meeting session on that topic to try to, you know, start having some discussion around it. And it was fascinating because I presented all this data about how faculty assess women differently than men. And then there was one slide about the ubiquity of sexual harassment by patients towards women, which is absolutely like 100% of us experience that. And the entire rest of the conversation with the faculty was like, how can we get our patients to behave better? And I kept trying to bring it back to like, okay, we can't really control what patients do. So how about us? How can we do it differently? And like, you know what? When patients, you know, say things to our residents, we need to go in there and stand up for them. Like, no, we don't need you to charge in on your white stallion. That's also sexist. Maybe we can talk about our own behavior and the things that we can control. And people could not have that conversation. People could not open their minds to the idea that they may be part of the problem. What experiences have you guys had broaching this in your own institutions, and has anything been successful?
the fact that when you throw those comments up, and one of my first thoughts is this related to the gender of the learner?
Right.
Is a result of the interventions that I've received so far as a faculty member. That wasn't a realization I came to on my own. That was because we had several, grand rounds and medical educator courses within our institution, just kind of bringing this up again and again and again in different formats.
But you're an exceptional guy, right? Like, you are a career educator. You're a person who has taken many, many hours out of your own life to be part of this course and to enhance your skills as an educator. So you're arguably different than your rank and file faculty, right?
So I will say it's interesting because I read that and I was like, oh, it's not because she's a woman. Like, don't think that. I shut that voice down.
Your own internalized sexism?
Yeah, exactly. But I recently pointed out, because we're trying to, at Lehigh Valley, we were trying to kind of increase the diversity and stuff, and I brought up the fact that for 2 years in a row, out of 16 residents, we've only matched 2 women. 2 years in a row.
What?
And I brought this up. And the response that I got from one of our APDs was, well, the match is random, and we can't control that.
You can control who you interview and who you rank.
Exactly. It has to be intentional.
We have no men.
So, but it's, so like that was, we don't have a problem. The problem is that women don't want to rank us, is what I was told.
Oh,
That is the problem.
Yeah, that is a problem.
That's the parent.
So I was going to say, we matched, I think, the current PGY2's only matched 1 female.
Yeah.
And so when I started, they were really just like, we're going to, like, they analyzed who they matched and they realized it was like a 50-50 for like however many. And they basically was like, they were basically like, we're going to be upfront with this. Like, that was how they interviewed, and they had like a good amount of female representatives in interviews, basically like, we're trying to do all this stuff for females. So we really aren't biased against males. I mean, against females.
Yeah.
But like, you can do stuff.
We have the same problem.
Yeah.
Like going into be second and third year class, there's 2 girls.
Yeah.
Then the intern, so we went through this whole thing all last year, like, what can we do? Let's increase diversity. Now we have only 1 male in the new class.
We've had the same thing. Like, we had 1 all-male class except 1 woman, and then we had like 2 all-female classes. Like,
But it's random.
But we ranked more women.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, that might be sexist
And
the
I
other
don't know,
way.
because, we ranked, I think we ranked like 7. Like, we did, like 2 years ago when the match was crazy, we did terribly. So like, we completely like revamped everything. So I think they interview women, but I think, it's when you're interviewing them and then, does your program cater to women, and like that kind of stuff comes up too.
I think the word, someone said fit earlier too, and that's like a trigger word for me now, because the program that I graduated from and was first faculty there used that all the time when we were describing potential candidates. It's like, oh, well, do they fit in with this vibe, or and now in my new program, it's like, don't ever say that word, because we don't want people that fit in.
Yeah.
We want people to bring a broad range of experiences and diversity and ideas, and I hope it's different from your end. So I think it's kind of like a cultural thing, like a shared mental model, so to speak, like getting everybody on board with that idea.
But also, how do you define who fits into your program?
Well, that was the problem. That's bias in itself. So
Right.
you'd have the...
we want to match people like us.
Yeah, the old program director would be like, oh, they're not a good fit. I'm like, how? What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah, what? How? What specifically doesn't fit? So yeah.
That exact argument, I mean, I'm really old, and I don't think this would happen as overtly anymore, but it was used point blank overtly to discriminate against a gay applicant in one of our application years, that would prevent them from fitting in. I'm like, first of all, you have no idea of the sexual orientation of your residents. Like, just stop. And it just, I mean, it can be weaponized for sure. Really, white men do best in our program. They fit, right? Like, it's a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
But back to this poor learner. So how do you get your faculty to move the needle on bias, especially bias which is, like most bias, implicit and immutable and just part of our having grown up in the cultures that we've grown up in?
I think people do best when they have data and examples, because I think a lot of people get uncomfortable, one, because they're like either, well, that's not me, I'm not biased, or two, it's uncomfortable that you are biased, so like, what am I going to do with this information and how do I change? So when you have data, so I think it would be really interesting to break it down into maybe even if you got personalized information of like, these are the words you use more often with men, like men or women or however, that would be an interesting way to reflect that to everybody and to do a gut check, for lack of a better word.
That's a really great point, right? Because like the experience that I had trying to lead this conversation was that people couldn't talk about it.
Right.
They couldn't conceive of themselves as being part of the problem.
Right.
So the idea that like, here's data, we are all part of this problem together, right? What else?
Maybe going off your example, like also giving the ways, like, here's what you said, here are ways to make this more constructive without the bias. So then they can kind of figure out, like, maybe this is what I think, but how do we take bias? How do we try to mitigate as much bias as we possibly can?
But if it's an implicit bias, how can you really change it? If you don't know that you have it, how can you change it?
Right, you have to be.
It's like,
Yeah, it goes back to faculty development. Like you have to really focus on objective, specific interactions and data and spell it out specifically. Like even the good ones don't really.
To your point, though, I mean, I think that what Sydney's saying is that you can change your behavior, you can change the language that you use in the assessment because you clearly are coding some sexism into that language, but maybe you can't change the fact that this person rubbed you the wrong way because she's a woman behaving in a way that you don't think women should behave, right? That's the part that's harder to get at. Like you can learn the skills of saying things in a more gender or race or whatever neutral way, but can you actually change the feelings that you have when this strident woman gets in your face and defends her plan to you? You know?
Again, I would want specific information, like what was their reaction? So when they got defensive and you explained your reasoning, how did they take it? Did they go read more? Did they have a better defense? Did they,
Yeah, I think, I found that like when people say something like that, if you even just say like, what do you mean by that? Like it makes them think about like what they said, and then it makes them almost like check. I don't know if it makes them check their biases, but like it makes them take a second to it's not just an offhanded comment. They have to like justify what they're saying.
Right. Well, it forces them to reflect on what the behavior they saw was, right? And by thinking about the behavior rather than your subjective impression of the behavior, that automatically takes some bias out, right? Because what the person did is what they did regardless of who they are. Whereas your reaction to it may be very influenced by bias. Your observation of the behavior should arguably be less so.
Probably also use this as like faculty education. Like I don't read our students for the residents I do, and like so if I read one of these for resident and I knew her to be otherwise, hey, I saw your evaluation. Can you tell us more? This is like not congruent with anything we've ever heard. She's more described as this. Is everyone else wrong, or are you maybe biased? And that's kind of moved people like, okay, it's unlikely that every other member of the faculty is wrong.
Right. Yeah, harder when there's more of a divide, right? Like when you have an outlier, that approach becomes easier. Other thoughts? All right, well, we've solved bias and CBME. So we're not scheduled for a break for half an hour, but I have had this giant coffee and really have to pee. So why don't we take 5-10 minutes, and then we'll come back. We'll just do a little run through and kind of hear about your experiences in the course, and then we can keep talking about stuff until Wendy gets here. Sound good?
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
All the light topics of CBME and bias.
There was someone who's like, he went to a talk at Cord about bias and like learned all the gender terms. And this one says, I use this all the time. Is that a bad thing? And we're like, he's not on the SLOR committee, and so we changed a lot of this stuff to like take out the gender bias. Also, I didn't realize that was like.
There's like something online that we could do. They were like doing it for a little while.
So we literally had like a code sheet
Yeah.
that like.
Yeah.
So like now I know a lot of the words, but like.
I think there's that because I think they were also running some of our jobs through like the job descriptions through some of that also. Yeah.
Honestly, that's like a great idea, but it was like interesting because he was like, we do this a lot in our slows, and we're all like,
Yeah, and I was like, hey, is this for real? And we're like, yep.
We actually don't. We edit everything they give to us a lot.
I'm excited. I'm nervous because I trained at Lehigh Valley, and then it says like what I know.
Yeah.
So I'm very nervous, but
It'll be the best thing
It'll be
ever.
really
I
interesting.
did the
I
same
think the
thing. I
same thing.
stayed on for
I was thinking recently
almost
about
4
like the
years
people that
before I
are actually
graduated.
like
Three.
introverted and how we even really like
And
bias or words we use.
now I say I regret not.
Or is it?
Yeah.
spreading your wings sooner.
for a while, because when
Yeah, I think
so I
our
stayed, I
faculty
did
definitely
fellowship
would
where I
benefit from
trained
seeing.
too. So
we have
like
some
I
people
thought
that
about
are like,
leaving and then decided to stay for fellowship. And I thought about leaving
like, don't want to
again,
hear
and I
about
stayed.
bias, don't want to talk about bias. I also am in Texas.
And I
so
kept saying like, I was like, if I don't leave now, I'm
Are you
gonna
talking about it?
leave. And
But,
yeah, I think there's some people who like
I think the data is helpful.
still look at me like I'm a resident.
whole Texas thing
or
is-
fellow. And
You
it's just
went
it's
through your fellow.
time.
It's
I'm a
nice
one-year
to
fellow.
Yeah.
Next year.
I'm going
be able to kind of completely recreate your own narrative.
Yeah, and I'm nervous because I'm going to be the ultrasound fellowship director, so that's something I haven't done before, but I'm very very excited.
The one thing I've learned in my very limited experience thus far is a person who is like eager and willing to do the hard work
Yeah.
is much better than any experience level.
And I was very transparent in my interview. I was like, I've been the assistant program director, but I was like, and I'm very passionate about like the education stuff. I'm like, the administrative stuff, don't know as much. I'm gonna need some help with that.
But you have like a million resources, and through all this, everybody helps each other out.
Yeah, and Christiana Cares, they've had a fellowship since 2001, so it's not like I was the first fellow at Lehigh Valley, so we were still a very brand new fellowship. But at least I know like this is like a developed program.
It's also nice to have someone come in kind of with fresh eyes.
Yeah, that's where I am now. A lot of people stay on, from training, and I feel like it's a lot of, oh well, this is what we do here.
Kind of inbred in a way.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to like go somewhere else.
I was gonna say, from someone who came from a different program.
Yeah.
I was like, why do you guys do it this way? And there was a lot of like, and now they're like finally basically being like, okay, like, well, I don't have to defend my ideas as much.
Yeah.
And they stopped asking when I'm like, is this the right way? They stopped basically being like, well, why do you think it's not the right way? I was like, I don't think it's not the right way, but it's like,
I think it's
other ways.
I think it's going to be interesting too. So Christiana just went through. They were a private group, and then they became that group. That contract wasn't re-upped, and they became hospital employees. So there was a lot of drama, and I think like a third of their attendings left.
Oh wow.
Like effective January 1st.
But the hospital is non-profit, public.
It's a non-profit hospital.
So that's still better than many alternatives.
Right. So I was like, so where I am now, I work at a non-profit hospital and I'm a hospital employee. So I was like, I'm okay with that. But like, I think like a third of their attendings left.
That was also one of their big claims to fame is being
Yeah.
Small Democratic group.
Small, Democratic group, But so the hospital didn't re-up their contract, so they all became hospital employees January 1st. So that was
interesting.
So I recognize I'm starting with like a fair amount of drama, but I'm hoping that's like, they're moving past it. But I also recognize like they're hiring a ton of people, so there's gonna be a lot of like new blood. I'm not gonna be like the only new person. But
it'll be an opportunity to establish yourself as an expert early too. Like I've been doing this and I know, and then when they bring on new people, you're kind of leading them that way.
And I'm excited. I had the opportunity to talk to somebody who's going to be like, so I'm going to be doing the fellows, and I met with one of the people that does like the resident ultrasound education, and she had just finished. She did like Rutgers fellowship, and so she was like a newer grad. She's like a year behind me. And she was talking about how like welcoming and stuff like that. So very nervous but very excited for a new chapter.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Plus, I get to work with Jason Nomura, who is like, he's very like popular in like the ultrasound world. Like he's very very established and stuff, so fangirl a little bit when I get my
What's his role?
He's the ultrasound director, so like
Of the division.
division of ultrasound, yeah, so we'll work together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, change is always scary, but I found that anytime I do something big like that,
Yeah.
it's always better in the end, and I'm always like, why didn't I do it earlier?
Yeah.
Because you're afraid of change.
Yeah, and I told my director about like the position. He was like, "Well, it's a no-brainer. You have to take that opportunity to go."
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'll make the change in like September. It's like I have to give like 120 days notice at my current. That's what my contract says for my current place. So, yeah. So I think fellowship match opens like September 14th, and I start there September 16th. So it's just gonna be like hit the ground running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me in. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, no, I
gonna
didn't
be-
have anything scheduled for this morning. I was like, where can I go? And they were like, come here.
See, now you're like getting a peek under the hood
Yeah.
of all the stuff we agonize about when we try
Yeah, now
to.
I'm more scared, but
SAEM
it's
just
good.
started
No, don't be
scholarships that year,
Okay.
and the
Because
application
you've
was due
got
like 30 days
lots
after I
of
started.
really smart
Oh, yeah.
So it was
people
like,
who are
here's the
thinking
job.
really hard
Break
about
down the
these
entire
issues and
fellowship.
trying
Yeah.
Pull it down,
very hard to
back
make
all
medical
about
education
it.
better, and you have no
And
idea
your
how much
job,
better it is
like,
now than it
your
was when
success
I
in
was
this job is
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Like,
That's
it's,
terrifying. I will say it's nice that
I
because
honestly
they
can't
had this
believe
whole
that
like
we did what we did.
like drama with the
Yeah, the
contract and
stories
stuff,
are
they
just-
didn't recruit a fellow for this coming year, so I'll have like kind of a building year
Yeah.
of like getting used to the job before I'm like, responsible for somebody's future, which is good.
That's the other weird thing I didn't expect is like
Yeah.
with a residency, you've got a whole group of people, you've got a whole group of faculty. With like
Yeah.
a small division, with
Yeah.
one fellow at a time, like
Yeah.
I feel responsible for this person.
Yeah, it's like a built, like you have to be their mentor. Right? Like,
I am
yes, I would love to help Laura. Thank you.
Yeah.
Help me.
They got
Yeah.
a different level of,
Yeah, I was just going to bring some swag
Yeah.
over so everybody got some,
It's
since we're
also
all
very
crammed on this
fun.
table.
So cute.
That's nice.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
I drove to Maryland to get fingerprinted from.
Oh, yeah, to get
I took it. Yeah, I have to. Yeah, so Christiana has a couple sites in Delaware, and then they have one. They took over Union Hospital in Maryland, which is like right over the border.
So you have to be licensed too in both states?
Both states, I have to get 2 DEAs.
We can either talk right after this for a little bit, or.
Dude, where are you going this year? Because you're just like Walsall, right?
Staying.
Nice.
I'm staying.
Amazing. My
I literally
Wow,
started
get more coffee just to-
Yeah, at the same time.
They were like,
They were like, well, I was
because it's so dry and cold.
And you're at, I'm sorry, you're at UMass. I'm gonna, Danielle Sultan is
Oh, yeah.
one of your,
Yeah.
so she's coming from Lehigh Valley. She's great.
She's great. I feel bad because she always emails me, and I'm like, just like, you need to just text me, and she just will refuse to text me. I was like, just text me, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I'm very excited for her.
Yeah, no, she's been. I actually don't know you what she looks like, but I
Oh,
keep
look,
seeing her.
I get one too, you guys.
You did it.
I did it.
But yeah, she mentioned, she
I
called
don't
me,
want to
and I
throw
was
down
like,
y'all, but mine
maybe
has
in
this gold.
Oh, wow.
I was
Actually,
just
yeah, we didn't get that.
I Googled, I Googled you, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, same program, okay, cool.
Yeah, I think I told her, I was like, oh, I know somebody at UMass.
Yeah.
Yeah, very excited.
No, I'm
think
kind of scared.
Does everybody here use Google Drive?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
routinely? I was just thinking maybe like since this is the last day, we could like set one up and
Yeah.
future collaborations or
Yeah.
drop resources or whatever.
I love that. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys have done like the ASEP version of this, but yeah, like my class still will be like run stuff by and talk about like we can work on trying to do like studies together and like that kind of stuff.
I was gonna say, does everyone have WhatsApp?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys want to set up a WhatsApp group too?
Yeah.
Sure.
I almost never use it.
Oh,
Now you have an excuse to.
now you have an excuse to use it.
Oh, it's so helpful for emergency medicine because it's like 24 hours a day. You can please help me.
Yeah.
My residency class still has one.
Yeah.
We're a group me.
Yeah.
Yeah, our residency class still has
Oh,
one.
WhatsApp. I think I have GroupMe. I don't know if I use WhatsApp.
My WhatsApp is like,
We can do Google
Bill.
Drive would be nice just because we can like, then you can update, like, you can like upload files and stuff like that.
yeah, we can like make different
Yeah.
folders for different projects, whoever wants to be on what.
Yeah, like it. Awesome.
And if you guys need like the what is it, the references for like academic advancement when you need somebody that like you've never worked with to write you a letter of recommendation.
Yeah.
Recommend me, I know.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recommend me.
I'm already worried about that.
Yeah.
That's on the random list of things that I should do while I'm here, because like you're not on shift, like don't have a ton of shifts, so I have like my like big annual review packet of like everything that I've
Yeah.
done for the past year that I have to sit down with my chair and I'm like looked at it, I was like, oh, that's so much. Yeah, everything's just
One.
We can help write you. It looks like you got some good things to say.
Yeah, just be less strident.
Yeah, let's try to.
Speaking of, so
That's
so
my
like,
professional goal for 2024.
Get somebody to call you strident.
yeah. Speaking of,
On
though,
review of this
those
course.
comments happen.
Yeah.
I dare somebody to put it in the course eval. I will send you a cake.
I've told my residents sometimes there's like a cold.
I'm going to get cake
To the adult emergency department.
Congratulations on your strident
Collect
designation.
on that in Philadelphia next year. Where's my cake, Jules?
All right, so we've just had our great certificate ceremony. I hope you enjoyed it. Let's just go around. I'd love to hear really quickly just kind of like how your projects are going and if there's anything from this course that you're bringing to bear on that project or on your future lives. This is really just about making me feel good and strident. So, Jeff.
So what the project is?
Sure, yeah.
So I made what we're calling Resuscitation Field Day, which is like a half-day experiential learning thing for the residents. Kind of, they're assigned into teams, and it's like a friendly competition where they go around between different challenges at different stations. And so the idea is it's kind of combining rapid cycle deliberate practice and gamification, which are kind of some of the concepts we've touched on through the course. And then we ran it once last year, and then I learned a lot from running it, and then was kind of backed up with some of the sessions that we saw. I was like, oh yeah, well this kind of makes sense. And so then I'm rerunning it again in like another month, kind of version 2.0, and then we'll be kind of packaging that up for distribution. I'm going to pick your brain about kind of how best to do that, but I've got some ideas. I think I came in expecting that I needed to, like, what I needed was to get a better paper than what I've been publishing so far. And I think with the project, it doesn't lend itself well to like the better paper, but suddenly I realized I would much rather attend a workshop about how to build something like this than most of the workshops I attended at the big SIM conference this year or the year before,
Yes.
year before that. And so all of a sudden, I think I've realized as this has gone on that I would be much more proud of this as a workshop than I would be of the paper that comes with it. I still need to like turn it into a paper just so I can go, because when I come up for promotion, my
Everything's gotta be a paper.
institution wants to see a paper, but that's not, I don't think that's the product that I'm going to be proud of 5 years from now.
Got it. I love that. That makes me super happy because if we go back to our very first session, not everything has to be research. Like scholarly education is scholarship, and disseminating that in different ways and in ways that are going to be impactful for other educators and learners is absolutely killer. And we need to normalize that as a profession, that like research is not the only form of academia.
Do you think so thinking about like how to promotion and things like that, is there a grand rounds opportunity where you can go somewhere and run that at another institution as quote unquote a grand rounds?
And get more data.
And
And
then you'd have like, because I think, I don't know, we're restructuring our like all of our didactics and stuff like that. And grand rounds kind of seems a little antiquated to me. Like you stand up there in front of a room and talk about like the things that people done. Some of them are really cool, but I think that would be a really interesting pitch of like another way to do grand rounds.
Yeah.
Because if you've already done it and you already built it, like you could bring it somewhere and do it with another whole group of people. That would be cool.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
I would also say like on the whole theory of like double dipping and triple dipping and all that stuff. It sounds like we did something kind of similar, not exactly simulation, but like gamification with a bunch of different stations for disaster medicine training. So basically the idea was they rotated through these 4 different stations. One was like triage patients, one was an actual SIM, one was an escape room, one was trivia. So we did a medical knowledge assessment before, after, and then a couple weeks after. And then we had each station them just do a basic, like Kirkpatrick 1, like, did you like this? Was it engaging? Whatever. So each station became its own abstract and presentation between Cord and ACEP. And then we wrote up the entire thing with the medical knowledge assessment part as the paper.
So that's a really good idea, because one of the things I'm like...
What session are you looking for?
Looking for an interesting session.
Okay.
One of the things...
Okay, thank you. Laura will assist. This is a course that's been running all year that we're wrapping up.
My apologies.
No worries at all. It is interesting.
I just figured I'd pick up some tips on how to present better.
Okay, maybe there's a good session for that. Thank you so much, Laura.
So one of the things I've been kind of morally struggling with is that in all the... So we've got a SIM division of like, 5 people, it changes all the time. So they're probably going to be the ones who are in charge of each station and who I'm like organizing directly with. And then they've got other faculty that I've paired with them to kind of be the boots on the ground. But I can't come to a workshop with like 20 people in the middle. Like I can't put everybody involved in this on there. But that would be a really good way to kind of more equitably like get credit to the people who have helped with the actual tasks of this.
Yeah,
I think kind of break these up into abstracts.
Exactly. You have an abstract for each one, so everybody gets their moment in the spotlight, and you can just be the senior final author. But then on the paper, you can just have an acknowledgement section. Like have the people that actually contributed to the data analysis and writing the paper, those are the authors, and then you have an acknowledgement at the end, like thanks to all these people who helped develop the tool.
You could also publish the actual curriculum for each section on MedEd portal with the individual faculty members as first authors.
This is something I've been like morally struggling with. So thank you for that. I'm definitely going to go forward with that. Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Sarah.
My project was difficult to implement. I learned a lot this year trying to like navigate. I learned a ton on a lot of things. One, for our research part, like our IRB is very difficult to navigate. So I'm working actually with a couple of the other newer med faculty on like trying to have a system of support for trying to navigate our IRB to get studies done. And then kind of like what you were saying, trying to turn everything into some type of publishable product has been like one of the biggest things that I've taken away and been able to like kind of help mentor some of our younger like residents in too when they're excited about a project, but helping them kind of navigate how and like what the different avenues are. So that's been one of the biggest things I took away.
Excellent.
And I get to meet all you guys.
I know, right? How awesome is that? Yeah, and definitely like the abstract route is so great for residents and medical students because like, you know, for us, you reach a point where you're like, I'm not standing in front of a poster. It's not happening. But like that's the inroad, right, for the junior people.
Yeah, for sure. And our residents, like some of our residents wanting to do different fellowships and just trying to help them find like a little bit of support to be able to, and encouragement to actually make the poster, make the abstract, like sign up for the like smaller conferences has been something I've been able to help them navigate too.
Awesome.
I have a couple things going on, but the main deliverable that's coming from this is put together a gamification workshop that we submitted actually to be presented here, but got declined, unfortunately. And then through a twist of fate, I'm going to be doing it at the Southeastern Regional Meeting in July. And the idea that kind of sets this apart from different gamification workshops is it's really like a hands-on, interactive, leave with resources to implement it yourself. So there's going to be like a brief didactic on, you know, what we do know, what the evidence does show about gamification and kind of the pearls and pitfalls and that type of thing. And then rotation through multiple stations. So there's going to be like one that's board games that have been created, how they work, how you can make your own. Here's all the resources, the links to buy stuff. go do it. Same thing, escape room, same thing, trivia-based applications. So basically people come to this workshop and yeah, we're going to talk about some fun things that we've done, but also you leave with like tangible materials to do it yourself. So that's a big thing.
And as a fun aside, I get to attend the Southeast Regional Conference this year, and I'm really looking forward to this.
The keynote speaker.
Where is it?
It's in Orlando.
Okay.
Did you present something similar to MSH?
One of my residents did like one of her specific projects.
Okay.
It was like a wilderness medicine simulation.
Okay.
Cool. But yeah, it was kind of like how to do your own thing. The other thing I really want to do, and I haven't made much headway, but I'm going to do it, maybe if anyone's interested in getting involved, I really want to do a critical interpretive synthesis of all the literature in gamification. Because as we've talked throughout the year, it's like really hard to get good data because it's all like Kirkpatrick level 1 and maybe 2 sometimes, but you can't really assess like changes in behaviors or patient outcomes very easily. So like just look at the breadth of literature, both EM and the whole scope of medicine, and kind of what are the best practices, how can we make this more evidence-based. So that's a goal for the next 12 months.
Awesome.
And we're doing a gamification project too.
We
So
are.
all gamification.
It's all fun and games all the time. So anything you took away from this course that really propelled that?
I think, well, definitely the networking is the number one thing. And I think I loved the variety. I mean, when I've heard that this course wasn't going to be continued, I was like one of the people that was the most angry, I think. I actually wrote a letter to the board of SAEM about how disappointed I was that they weren't continuing this for the future. Because I think I've done ASAP Core Teaching Fellowship, I've done MERC. Yeah, this is targeted, it's close-knit. We had a broad variety of topics, and I feel like we adequately covered almost everything that transition from junior to mid-career faculty would. So I appreciate all of that. Very disappointed that it's not moving on.
So I kind of did a collaboration with the Admin Operations SAM committee. So one of the year goals was a white paper on admin fellowships, and I took a lot of the teachings from this and put it into a survey. And interestingly, kind of talking through your all survey and things like that, lots of lessons learned on what people will fill out in a survey.
Oh, yeah.
But in the variety of educational opportunities and also how we provide education in admin and operations for a fellowship, even though all of the fellowships that we queried and surveyed were SAEM accredited, but how they actually build out all of this is wildly different.
Oh, yeah.
And so we're going to write that up as a white paper.
Nice.
And so it's super interesting in kind of what themes that people utilize and how they do education in this space, because there was a lot of just like you work as an assistant medical director, but then there's a lot of other programs that are like didactic based teaching curriculums, which was interesting as well. So I think that'll be helpful.
Did you learn anything that you're going to put into your own fellowship, or that you're going to sort of advance as a best practice in that space?
Well, yeah, because I got voluntold that I was taking a fellow, so it's been trying to make a curriculum on that. It's been trying to make a curriculum, so I've taken a lot of different of everybody else's curriculums and kind of tried to figure out what you actually need to learn and what is actually helpful versus just kind of one of those things that you have to do kind of. So yeah, putting that all together, it's kind of back burner, but hopefully it'll be done this year.
When your fellow starts in July?
Oh no, I have a fellow now, and I got another one in July. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been.
It's like, yeah, you're like building the plane while flying it?
Yes,
kind of?
exactly.
Okay.
Yes, we're like putting on the doors. I'm like, drive the plane. How about that?
Take the wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So my project was kind of a variation on a theme of stuff I've done before. So in the past, myself and my director, we've made these, we call them rapid education events, and it's how we try to get faculty up to speed on ultrasound, because as you guys are all aware, there's varying levels of people that graduated, from places where they did tons of ultrasound, and there's people who were like, I can identify what an ultrasound is, so
And then there's old people. Can I just tell you, the technique of ultrasound-guided IV access was published in May of my senior year of residency.
So we recognize
Never caught up.
That's fair. Varying levels of attending, competency, comfortability, that kind of stuff with ultrasound. So we try to we were like, what's the best way to get people to do ultrasound, because, getting attendings to do things when they're not getting paid in their free time, difficult, right? So we call them rapid education events. So you come in, there's usually a lecture portion that goes over normal anatomy, how to do the scans, what are you looking for, what are the indications, and then the afternoon is usually or the second half of the course is usually actual hands-on. We get standardized patients, we bring in a whole bunch of machines, you go through the events. For procedures, we have usually mannequins or phantoms that people are practicing on, so you get everything in one very condensed 4 or 5 hour block. So for this one, I did a variation in that it was all trauma themed, and I got it approved for trauma CME for the attendings. So we charged an admission fee, and then they got CME credit. They could use their CME to pay for it. That put funds into our ultrasound department, and then people really liked it. So, and we called it Beyond the Fast Exam, Ultrasound and Trauma. So it was and it was ocular, because people are dying to learn ocular. So
and it's so easy and gratifying.
Yeah, you can find it.
I'm not a good ultrasound person, but I love ocular.
And it's
ultrasound.
way easier than ophthalmoscope for your retinal detachments. So we did ocular, we did fascia iliaca nerve blocks, we did advanced cardiac stuff. So we covered and we did pericardiocentesis with that. And then what was our last one? Oh, this is embarrassing. We did one more. I think we did lung.
I was going to ask if it was lung.
Yeah, lung and thoracentesis, ultrasound-guided thoracentesis. And then we collected data on it, we did pre and post tests, which was kind of rudimentary educational research of did teaching people actually help them learn, and it looks like it did.
The answer is usually yes.
Yes, yeah. And then kind of throughout this course, and I've published previous REEs in oh, look, people learn, but that, again, that's very basic. So kind of in learning through this course. So I did submit that abstract of oh, people learn better to the ASAP research forum to see if maybe I could get it published there, but we'll see. And then my next thing is I do want to, I wasn't familiar with JET EM before, so I'm going to probably try to publish hey, here's how you develop one of these things.
Yes.
And then I actually talked to Doug Franzen was my person we talked about actually even putting in top 5 tips for getting your faculty to learn ultrasound,
yes.
like the SAEM pulse or something like that. So that's kind of where I plan to go next. Again, not a PubMed ID, but still getting academic stuff out there, I think.
Absolutely, and probably honestly higher impact, because really, how many papers do y'all have time to read? Right?
Yeah.
Does your department bill for ultrasounds?
Yes.
So could you theoretically look at the next 6 months and see if after the workshop they build for more ultrasound and trauma than before?
I think that would be a great study. We're trying to do that. We also, so there was a lot of in ultrasound we talk about the carrot or the stick and getting people to use ultrasound. Do you threaten people or do you give them a reward? So we also say again, if you're not credentialed in a certain thing, then you can't supervise a resident in doing that. And then the residents are always well, why can't they? So we'll just be well, the residents are going to think you're silly or whatever. And then we also, again, we got buy-in from our admin so that if you learn a new ultrasound, if you get credentialed in a new ultrasound application, then you get points towards your bonus too.
Nice.
So yeah, so CME, trauma CME, which everybody wants, and points towards your bonus, and the residents think you're cool. That was our kind of trying to get everybody to get on board.
It's a good carrot.
Yeah.
I love to be cool.
Yeah. That's why I did fellowship, Yeah.
I was recently credentialed in left-hand ultrasound, and I would like a bonus for that.
Yes. And then next year I'll do right-hand ultrasound. Yes.
Yeah.
So I entered this course having just figured out kind of like what my desired professional niche was, which is the intersection of psychosocial factors and resuscitation teams, non-technical skills. And I had like a variety of projects in various stages, and was trying to figure out like how do I tie all this together. So through the early summer, kind of figured that out, and Meg Wolf was awesome in helping me sort of choose my like assigned mentor. Settled on a lit review on the topic, as no one has done one, which was a really interesting process for me to learn, because I've done lit reviews, but I've never done a systematic one, which sounds easy, and turns out it's
I was like, does it sound easy?
But as soon as you use the phrase scoping review, it becomes the Wild West. There's no rules. You put systematic in, you got some problems.
You know, I did go down that rabbit hole. I was like, I could do a scoping review. It felt like,
like that means I Googled some crap.
I felt like a teenager like exploring alcohol. I was like, ooh, I can probably get away with it. And then various advisors were like, no, you're not going to do that. So fast forward, I spent a good portion of my year figuring out what is involved, how do I do this, assembling a team, like getting all the logistics behind this done, which finished that about 3-4 months ago, and now we're actually working on the first part, which is we have like all of our questions and our initial search, but now we got to go through all these articles in the first pass, and I'm excited because now we are getting ready for that second part where we actually get to like read all the papers in depth. It's been a long year, but I appreciate the introduction to systematic literature.
There you go.
I would say, as far as this course, like I have loved this course. I've learned so much, and I think some of it is. I've been at the same place for 11 years, and we're on like one geographic extreme of the country, and I don't really get to interact with people from across the country very often, right? Like. West to us is UMass. Like south is Brown. So I have loved hearing from you all about what's going on across the country. Like, oh my God, people are doing my job at other places, and how are they solving the same problems?
Yes.
And like Shane, I feel so sad this course is coming to an end. Totally makes sense, because there's no way it's reasonable to expect hundreds and hundreds of hours of your time and like everyone else invested in just a few of us.
But honestly, you know, I mean, again, I get it. Like we need, as an organization, we need to serve the largest number of members. But the size of this has been, from my perspective, such a benefit, because having an intimate group and being able to all learn from each other is just really what learning community is about.
And
like I mentioned,
future people are we going to help from having been a part of this? It's not just 10 people, it's the hundreds of people we're going to affect.
And I feel like, like the benefit is the small group. Like we talked about, like the ASAP one, you're like just sitting in a classroom, right? Like, and there's small group stuff, but like here it's like you get, like you said, you get to bring up, hey, this is the issue I'm having. How do you guys do it elsewhere? Or like, oh, I don't know where to publish this, right? Because it's interesting. I think I said at the very beginning when we talked about like how you decide where you publish stuff, and I was like, oh, my research team just tells me where to publish it. And I actually like recently was like, hey guys, I think I want to publish this in JET-EM, and immediately my like research chair was like, had one of the research assistants be like, hey, can you just verify that this is like a legit non-predatory? Like she's like, I've never heard of this, and she's been our research chair for like 10 years. So like it's literally just, we talk about having like the same ideas, the same place, and like you get to branch out and like hear what other people are doing, and that's invaluable.
I do think we kind of got away with it a little bit. Our class of, like, this is way over-resourced for maybe 100 learners, and we got your full-time attention for a year, and then finally someone said, wait a second.
Come on.
So
I would gladly do it again.
Thank you.
I was like talking this up to like one of our new fellows is like one of her residents currently, and I was like just like when she called me, I was like, you don't do your first year, do your second year. You like actually know how to like navigate from work to like home, you know, at that point. So I was like,
No longer using Google Maps.
yeah. I was like talking this up to like a bunch of my education people, and and then I tell them I was like, yeah, it's like not a thing, and they were like, oh, I'm like, sorry.
Well, maybe we can make the 2.0 version a thing. I'm still hoping that we can pull together a task force to take up the mantle and rethink it. So last but by no means least, Sydney.
So I initially came into this wanting to do like a national social media survey on like how do your current PGY1s use social media. I got 30 something replies out of 200. So I was real bummed. Most of the people, like, because I like geographically was like, where are you from? And I think 50% of them were from like my institution and his institution, because I only did like 2 or 3 in the Northeast. I was like, so I was like really bummed about that. I didn't submit it for a didactic because like it's not going to get accepted. I tried to submit it for a core abstract, and then I got rejected because of the low like number, which honestly was like fair. So right now I'm considering like writing up. I did like a similar survey from like our med school that I submitted to a journal. So I'm waiting to hear back for that. But I was thinking of writing like an SAEM Pulse article about like, here's kind of how we use it. Here's some like preliminary, not great data, but like here's how you can use it. Because right now it's kind of been like stalled because no one's going to, everyone who I've talked to is basically like, no one's going to publish your study with such a low response rate. So
who were your target responders?
They were PGY1s. So I got.
So you were trying to get interns.
So I got a lot of. So like I got residency leadership or like people who are at these institutions who are in some type of leadership position to send it to the PGY1s. But the caveat of that was a lot of institutions didn't want to give me the email, so I had to send them the Qualtrics link so I can actually send them a follow-up survey. Unless I got buy-in from those leaderships to send a follow-up.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like design flaws I didn't really think about. And what happened was we learned about surveys and how to do best educational methods after we did it.
Oh.
Which like there's a lot of things I would do differently.
Yeah.
Honestly, going in the future. So I kind of basically got really. It was honestly I learned a lot of lessons for it. I'm doing another survey and something else, and like a lot of lessons I've learned from that is now kind of like being due. So I thought, as much of a failure as it was, I think it's a great like learning like how to not fail at a survey, national survey type of thing. Yeah. Which I jokingly mentioned to someone, and they were like, "You should write that up as an article," and I was like, "That's not what I meant." But I got voluntold to run like a transition to residency course for our 4th years.
Oh, nice.
So I ended up doing that, and after lots of research, I learned that everyone does it different ways. There's like 1 days where it's all procedural to like a month long, and I was like, I don't have that much time. So my entire thing kind of around it was how do I make this feasible with our SIM center gets paid for through the medical center, so like you have to pay for the SIM center, that's our highest resource. But like, how do I only have like me plus 2 or 3 other faculty for an entire day? So that was kind of how I did it. I only got attitudes like reactions, but I based them off of like EPAs, and like what their comfort level was. I'm considering publishing like a curriculum in MetaPortal or JET-EM now, basically being like, here's how you can do a low resource, well, if you can get the SIM center paper, here's how you can do a low resource transition to residency, and like improve that comfort level. I was also supposed to improve procedural competence in central lines, and I accidentally sent a video out on how to do central lines before the start of it. So that was my design flaw, but so that was kind of like where I'm at right now. But I love this course. I like I said, I was like recommending it to like all my educational people. I love the networking, and also like I think there was a lot of stuff that applied like I can take away and now apply to a lot of the research we're doing or education. We're kind of restructuring ILPs based on the lecture, and I'm like giving ideas on like how do we restructure ILPs. So I love this course.
Yay. Well, I'm really glad that you guys had a good experience. And it also sounds like everybody's kind of, like, even if your project hasn't moved forward in the way you imagined, like, you know, learn stuff from it, come up with visions to how to do it better in the future, how to help other people do it better in the future. I was trying to think for your PGY1 survey, because the easiest way to get good survey response rates is to harness some venue where those people are going to be and like build in time for them to do that. But like PGY1s across the country are never doing the same thing at the same time, other than in training, which is very...
Give a QR code at the end of IT. I close out.
Oh my God. So that was actually, as soon as you said that, I was like ITE, and I was like, yeah, that's not why.
Yeah, there actually, like, there was a whole bias survey that was inserted into the IT, like the post-ITE survey, but usually those are like, you know, big national research questions where there's like consortia working on them, so it would be harder as an individual to be like, will you do my social media thing? Dr. Coates, welcome. Hello. Your timing is exquisite. You can see because we are a small and mighty group, we are all just literally like King Arthur at the round table. So hello. Hello. Dr. Coates is going to do our keynote. So we had just finished up talking about some medical education hot topics, and we were just hearing about everybody's projects and where they are and what they've learned. And now we're excited to have you here. Excellent. So we've been all just sitting here together because, you know, we're all friends. Do you prefer to be up front, or what's comfortable for you? Because we can reorganize how we're sitting.
I don't care.
Okay.
I mean, you know, like I could either take out my computer and look at, I guess there's a computer that
There is a computer.
Okay.
Yes, and I have your slides up. So we talked about that.
Okay.
And that's you.
Okay, so what would you all prefer? Should I just like sit here and we just kind of like, I give you like a lecture that's interactive, of course, from here with me sitting down? Would you feel better if I stood there? Like, what do you guys want?
I think
we're easy.
Yeah. If you need your like slide notes and you want to stand there, that's...
Oh, you know what? If I had slide notes, I would read them and I'd be like, wait, what?
Yeah, I don't use them either.
I don't either. Like sometimes I use, for a brand new lecture that is like something out of my comfort zone, I'll write in the lecture notes, you know, well, like make sure you thank this person. You know, those are the kinds of things that, you know, the oversight that you don't want to, you know, mess up. But, well, I could.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
Why don't you stay here?
I'll stay here.
We have been having such a lovely conversation.
All right.
Dr. Coates needs no introduction, but just in case anyone's forgotten, she is the SAEM president for like 48 more hours, right? Or
no.
24? 12. 26.
23 and a half.
Okay. Okay.
23 and 45 minutes. I don't know.
So she has presided over a banner year for SAEM, emeritus professor at UCLA, and an all-around legendary medical educator who needs no further introduction. So I will turn it over to you. I put your slides in here. I hope I didn't screw anything up. The formatting didn't carry over perfectly from, but I fixed things, so I think it's all going to look okay, but if anything's weird, I apologize.
Okay. All right. I'll be, well, however it's going to work. It's going to work. Anyway, so Jules asked me to talk a little bit about competency-based medical education. And I'm just going to say that competency-based medical education has been around for decades. And the essence of what competency-based medical education is, you know, when you're ready and you can demonstrate the knowledge and expertise, then you move on to the next level. So I have 2 sons who are Eagle Scouts, and if any of you were in Boy Scouts, then you know that like you go from rank to rank, and there's certain things that you have to do, and then you face your board of review and you defend and prove that you know what you're doing in that way, and then you move on to the next rank, and it's time independent. So in theory, you can join Boy Scouts when you're 12. You could theoretically be an Eagle Scout when you're 14, though not advisable because, you're supposed to be sort of like the essence of leadership and everything else by then. And I think that is the key problem with competency-based medical education and why we all don't do it these days. Because it's like, well, residency starts in July, and what if my resident is my 3rd year out of a PG 1 to 3 residency program is competent in November? What the heck am I going to do if they go out and get a job? Who's going to staff the ED? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And so, many people who are in leadership positions that are administrative leadership positions think in the bean counting mode. So they can't quite adopt the idea that, so there's probably some areas where you're stronger and weaker. And just like when we accept residents who have maybe done half of another residency, we may excuse them from doing a surgery rotation, as an intern if they were 3 years out of a surgery residency or something like that, but they don't graduate early. So that's the essence of what competency-based medical education is. So Jules asked me to do a talk about that. And then I was getting to thinking, that's so 1990s and 2000s. And this is a cutting edge course, and what we ought to be teaching you as our future education leaders is the future of medical education, which is the sister concept called precision education. So you are getting your competency-based medical education lecture, but like all things, she asked me a question and I answered with something I would rather do.
Which, by the way, is a great career technique for life.
I think it's gotten you pretty far.
It may have. So anyway, the topic of today's conversation, with that as a background of competency-based medical education, we're going to talk about precision medical education. Can I just say one thing that if I had speaker notes, I would have remembered to say in the right order, but because I don't, it just popped into my head right now. So everybody worries that it's going to upset the whole medical education enterprise if you do competency-based medical education. But during World War II, the Vietnam War, and COVID, guess what? Everybody got promoted in place, field promotions, and they were fully able, the ones who were able to step into their new roles without problems. So, we know this isn't a technique problem, that this is an administrative problem, and that's who we need to consider in our fight to make this move forward. How about? All right, so what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about the principles of precision education. There's a few things about it that I hope you'll walk away being conversant about this topic. We need to talk a little bit about data science, and I'm approaching this from the position of a non-data scientist, because I think most educators are not data scientists, and if you are going to be responsible for implementing these strategies, you need to have a working knowledge in a language that you can understand. So if I'm being too simple and basic for you, then blame it on me being a boomer, and just go with the flow. A sister idea is the master adaptive learner model, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that, and that involves competency-based medical education and precision education potentially. And then if you decide that this is something that you would like to try, even in a teeny tiny little way, in your program, whatever role you have. Some pearls and pitfalls about successful implementation strategies that you can use to plan in advance. So precision education arose in tandem with President Obama's State of the Union or inaugural speech in State of the Union speech in 2015, where he proposed a new initiative for the Department of Health Services in the United States called precision medicine. Threw a lot of money at this concept that the idea that one treatment regimen fits all may not be the best idea. And so out of this came a lot of different targeted programs, gene therapies, things that related to an individual patient. And even though, you should have physical therapy and go to a physical therapy office if you sprain your ankle, like if you're living in the entranceway of the liquor store, this may not be feasible for you to do. So we need to think of how are we going to rehabilitate your ankle with that setting. So focus on the individual and talking about that. So some of the things, I mentioned one example about lifestyle. I mentioned gene therapy. So that's, a lot of the times where they make a designer chemotherapy for you based on the genetics of either your body or your tumor and the environment in which you live. Because if you're, let's say, in a rural area, you might be in a different setting than if you're in an urban area, and the resources may differ. So how do we compare this to precision education? So just try to draw parallels because precision medicine is highly accepted now. So if you think about diagnosis in medicine, you can sort of do this on your own, like H&P, and you send off tests, and you figure out where are they in their social history and everything else. Well, in education, we have a lot of data as well. We can look at their IQ, we can see test scores, their GPA, like all the things that you may look at in your preliminary look for residence, for example, or getting into college or getting into medical school. What are the things you have to submit that are objective data? And then you can also kind of add in a little bit of behavioral observations of teachers and people who work with you. This person really learns best if they sit in the front of the room, or this person works best if they're, working with a group, or this one's a solo learner, or something like that. And then, the prediction idea is if you have children who live in the shadow of factory smokestack output, you're going to have a lot higher incidence of asthma in those children. And so that. So when your kid comes in short of breath or whatever, and you find that out about their environment, then that's a different treatment plan than the person who lives on a farm and has asthma, right? And so you can predict what kinds of problems those kids are going to have. And you can, in fact, based on what you already know about population statistics, create predictive modeling of, if you meet this demographic, you're probably going to need these things. So in education, that might look like, if you come from this disadvantaged background and you don't know how to write very well, then maybe you need to have an English writing class in your first year of medical school or the summer before medical school so that you can, learn or relearn English grammar. I mean, I'm just making that up on the fly here. The treatment, you kind of match what how you've labeled these people with what kind of treatment that you're going to give. And in the learner, you want to target what they're missing. One good example of this is if you have ever had a nurse who comes to your residency program, the day they walk into your department, their patient care skills are amazing. But some of them may not even have the knowledge that they need as far as the differential diagnosis So like they do all the right things and you're like, well, what else do you think this could be? Well, I don't know what it could be, but we're going to give them nitro and we're going to do this. And so you find out, well, this person doesn't really need to learn how to start an IV. So instead of putting them on the rotation where they learn how to start an IV, we're going to put them on the rotation where they learn that chest pain isn't only like an MI. And so that's kind of like the background of all of this. And then in the prevention category, so for example, in preventive medicine, we look at the environment and their genes, and we recommend breast cancer screening earlier for people who have a family history. Similarly, we have these longitudinal assessments of the students to help us guide what's next in their educational plan. Okay, so is precision education like really a new thing? Okay, and you know that anybody who does this in a presentation, the answer is definitely no. So I'm going to demonstrate to you how come it's not a new thing. So you all look like you need a little break of, standing up or something like that. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is in elementary school, if you were ever, or your school ever had the ability to group people by ability for reading or math, if you were participating in a GATE program, you went to any kind of magnet school for science, the arts, you had an IEP because of a learning disability that needed extra help, you had access, you needed AESL training, you had remedial skills, or you were relegated to the social skills group. Any of those, stand up. All right, so is precision education, now stay standing, is precision education really new? If you look around, this is an example of precision education. Then you went to high school. So if you were ever in an honors class, an AP class, you ever had an IEP or any kind of accommodations, or when you played sports, you were assigned either to a JV team or a varsity team sport, or you went to a magnet school, you keep standing up. All right, so precision education continues through high school. When you went to college, if you were a participant in an honors program or JV or varsity sports, you were on some sort of specialized scholars track, you lived in a house like the Italian Learning and Culture house where they made nice Italian food for you every night, or if you had any kind of learning accommodations, then you keep standing up. And if you were in just sort of like the mainstream college experience and you did great anyway, but you weren't assigned to one of these programs or something like them, then you can sit down. And like for example, if you go to like some Ivy League school and you just like get in, that's like pretty amazing. Okay, so you can see that two things. One, if we were in a room of like 100 people, a lot more people would have sat down and there would have been a significant withdrawal of standees, okay? But you can see that right now we're starting to lose it a little bit at the college level, what K through 12 education has done so well. Now, in medical school, let's say, were you an MSTP student? Did you have a pathway program, like you enrolled in medical school in a particularly underserved pathway or some other pathway where you were brought in as a first generation person of whatever, you went to a dual degree program, or you had some non-random grouping where they divided your class based on some trait. Then if you had any of those, keep standing, and if you didn't, sit down. All right, so residency. In your residency, I don't think I have that as a, yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah, you do.
I do. Okay, so in your residency program, Did you have scholarly tracks? Like you show up and what you do in residency is you sign up and like you're in the education track to develop your skills as an educator, or you're in the research track or ops track. Or you have any other kind of different pathways that you could do in your residency program. If you had any of that, then you can keep standing up, and if not, you should sit down. So,
One out of everyone.
one out of everyone has, in this level of education, in the space in which we work, has something like this. So you can sit down.
Yeah.
And so.
It's only for, I don't know if that matters, but it's only for seniors. So you get your like basic stuff, and then as a senior resident, you get your tracks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, scholarly tracks exist in about 24% of residency programs
Really?
in North America. And some of them start in the second year, and most of them start in the senior year, whether that's the third or fourth year. And only about a quarter of them are mandatory that you pick one. So
Yeah, ours. I went to a 4-year program. We start in our 3rd year, and it used to be optional. And like 3 years ago, we said, okay, everybody needs to do a track.
Yeah. So it's a little teeny weeny beginning of this idea. So there's a lot of room for you to do this, and the place where you're going to want to look for ideas of how to make this successful are in the K-12 literature. So the database you're going to search is ERIC, because that's where all of the data comes from research in the K-12 space for ideas and what worked, what didn't work, and then you're going to develop it according to your ideas. So the characteristics of precision education, the interventions are targeted toward the individual. You have learning objectives that you have to have, right? But they're targeted toward the individual of how you accomplish those learning objectives. So if it's intubation, maybe somebody only needs to see a YouTube video of it, and then they can go intubate a patient, whereas some other people might need you to hold their hand as you help them hold the laryngoscope and pass the tube, right? So there's a wide range there. It avoids the waste time. So the idea of that is like the surgery resident I mentioned. When they come in with 3 years of surgery, sending them to a class of how to do like a pre-surgical scrub of their hands is probably a waste of their time, and they could probably go to a different rotation where they learn something else that's going to be long-term career development. So it's not really going to be a problem if at the end of their residency that not only did they meet the learning objectives of the residency, but they excelled in certain areas because you've given them an opportunity to shine. It's just going to launch their careers a little bit faster and better, and you can still say that they've accomplished their goals. So you can't just throw stuff at them and say, why don't you just go out and find any random YouTube video to teach you how to intubate. Everything should be scientifically based, in your selection process, in helping them understand how they should learn the best. And you should make sure that it's all ethical. And that's going to become more obvious when we're starting to talk more about data and things like that, that everything surrounding the precision education should be ethical. That you're not posting on a board, like this person is a level 1 in everything and this person is level 1532, like whatever it is, however you define ethics surrounding whatever the activity is. And there should be demonstrated improvements. So all of your assessment science is going to be really important there. How do you analyze your learners? So, the objective data only goes so far. We all know these people who come in with like step 1 scores of 270, and they can recite on the cellular mechanism how pulmonary edema works. And then a person with pulmonary edema comes into the department like ready to gasp their last, and they couldn't possibly recognize what that patient had, right? So we have to go beyond the objective data, and we have to observe them and help them come to terms with where they are in the learning continuum. And we have to develop a culture of safety with their self-evaluation as well as external evaluations. And, again, reminding you that their environment where they came from and whatever personal factors they have bringing in to the learning experience matter. So one of the biggest problems with precision education, competency-based education, is the challenges of flexibility.
Please tell me that's Photoshopped.
It's not Photoshopped. I got it off the internet. Everything on the internet is true.
Really good point.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have to be okay that if you come in and I say in order to demonstrate that you can do this, like you have to prove that you can do it, and then they can prove that they can do it. If I say, oh, well, everybody has to do 50 intubations, and they come in and they do the most complicated intubations without a hitch, like, do they really have to do like 39 more? Or am I ready to just say, okay, you're checked off on intubation, and like your colleague has to do 100 more, right? So some students want to just go with the flow, other students want to excel, other students are tentative and they want to like hang back. So you have to figure out what's the characteristic of the person you're working with and make it work for them. Timing is good. You have to think about when do you introduce new things, how often do you repeat things. If just because they mastered it once, they could have attrition of their learning, and you have to maybe revisit all of the topics again. So these are all things to consider when you're making the plan, and that leads to your monitoring schedule. So this is a lot of work for the educator because you're a member of the team who's helping them learn. And so you have to have ongoing formative assessments in which not only they tell you how they think they're doing, but you objectively tell them how they're actually doing. And then you might have to tweak their learning plan in real time. And one of the ways that people can do this is by using things like dashboards that are becoming very popular now, and maybe using the EHRs to find out if you've had enough of a variety of cases or whatever like that. It's a collaborative venture. You're not just sending your precision learner out to like treat themselves as far as designing their entire educational system and being responsible, and then you just stamp them at the end. It's like a collaboration. So implementing precision education is a team effort. It has the learners. It may have other people like the nurses or different people on the care teams, patients sometimes. It may need to have the support of your IT department to run different data streams, and like a key factor are the teachers and coaches. That would be you. All right, so I'm going to switch right now to talking a little bit about data and technology, and then we'll have time at the end. I want to make sure we get through all the ideas first, and then at the end, like, we can just have a discussion about any questions that you have about all of these things, unless there's a point here where you're like, wait, I can't possibly go on in listening to this unless you tell me the answer to something. And that's completely okay for you to interrupt and clarify, okay? So again, this is through the lens of a non-AI expert and a non-data scientist. And interestingly, I gave this as a keynote at a national conference elsewhere. And there were maybe the audience had about half of the audience were data scientists. And when I discovered that, I was sweating bullets at the podium because I'm like, oh my gosh, And at the end, they came up in a clump and they said, like, can we borrow what you said? Because this is all spot on. And like, this is at the level that all of the people we're trying to talk to can relate to. And despite trying this for like the last 10 years, we haven't been able to communicate with them in a way that doesn't just sound like a foreign language to them. So like that's where this is coming from. So some of you may be well versed in all of these areas, so I'm just asking for your patience that I'm not going into like the 28th degree of detail for any of these things right now. So simply, artificial intelligence, AI, is just anything that any computer can do to mimic things that were previously attributed to things that only humans could do in their intelligence. And that includes machine learning. So machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence that includes techniques that improve their tasks with learning. So if you have something that your computer is supposed to do, and then it sees that it doesn't really need to go through 8 steps to get to step 9, that it can go from step 1 to 3 to 9, then it'll do that, and that'll like eliminate a lot of the time required and data that it needs in advance. Then a subset of machine learning is called deep learning, and there's a term called neural networks, and that's kind of represented in the upper left picture. It's sort of in the shape of a brain for a reason, that the machine is able to train itself to perform a particular task. Okay, so these are the sort of 3 broad categories of artificial intelligence, each demonstrating more intelligence on behalf of the machine. And then I think that many of the techniques that are used that are based on these concepts are virtual reality and augmented reality. So VR and AR. So you need to leave here knowing what those 2 things mean, because if you talk to anybody who's going to help you with any of these ideas, those are the terms that are going to be in their language. So we already have AI everywhere we look. And so we have it in our charts, our electronic health records, and we can query our health records. They, like they pop up these messages. Are you sure you want to order 20 per kilo of this?
Yes.
Like all those things are machine learned, and then, somebody may approve that or not or whatever. All of these things like Waze and Google Maps, we found a faster route. So it knows, like, I can get you from point A to point B, and now I'm continuously improving that. I have a neural network going where I'm constantly checking the road conditions, and I'll propose an alternate route where, like, you can drive through a neighborhood in Boyle Heights at 10 o'clock at night and get there 1 minute faster if you actually get there. That happened to me one time. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, oh no. So, how do I get back to where I was before?
So it's not that intelligent.
It's not, it lacks social cues sometimes. And so one of the things that I really like a lot is the swimming thing, right? So there's that line that's overlaid on the screen, and then you see the swimmers, and it's like, the line is right there. All you have to do is just, one more stroke, and you're going to win. You're going to get a world record. And so that's kind of augmented reality, because, it's not reality in their world, but it's reality in somebody's world. So you're taking, like, the things that are already there, and you're making this happen. I don't know how many of you are on Duolingo, but somehow they make that stupid owl be part of your life. And why is it that we react to that at like 11:55 at night and the message comes up and says, "You moron, you haven't done this, you're going to lose your like 9-year streak," or what, whatever.
I will do literally anything that owl tells me to do.
It's really scary, actually.
That owl would be like, "Murder your family."
Yeah, and you'd be like,
Joe said it.
Yeah. So anyway, we need to join the 21st century as medical educators. It's a shame that, only through K-12 and sometimes in college and rarely beyond that this is a real thing. So I love the quote by Arthur C. Clarke. So we're not looking to have these people, this technology replace us. We are looking to this technology to make our jobs easier. And so that we can do the things that really a human brain can only do, and that the social interactions that we have and our perceptions are what we focus our time on, and that we can outsource the things that are a little bit less exciting to them. So what might happen here, I just listed a bunch of things in the bullet points here of what might happen as a result of precision education. And I want to call your attention to the doubling time from 1950 to 1985. So back in the days of Flexner in the early 20th century, when medical school was defined as a preclinical experience followed by a clinical experience, that was a huge concept, because before that it was just like you'd go rob a grave and you'd dissect some random victim that was in the ground and learn your anatomy, and then you'd go on ward rounds with Sir William Osler, and he would say stuff that people quote nowadays. And then Flexner said, no, we have to have an organized approach to education. They have to learn all the things that they need, and then they need to go to a place where they apply it. So in about 1950 to 1960, there was a big convention in 1967 to redefine what Flexner's model looked like. And that's when some curricular reforms were implemented, some of the earliest ones. I was lucky to go to a medical school, Case Western Reserve, where they had an experimental curriculum where we had clinical experiences in our first year. We got a pregnant lady as our patient on day one. We carried a beeper, which, by the way, makes you feel extremely important when you are a first-year medical student, to wear it on your belt. Nowadays, I know beepers aren't a thing, but back then, it was,
we still use them.
Yeah. I have a beeper. And when she went in, so what you did is you went to all of the OB appointments with her. So you'd meet her in the waiting room, and then you'd talk, and then you'd go in and see the doctor, the OB doctor, and you'd learn all about things. And then when she was ready to deliver, she called the number, and then you got paged and you met her in the delivery room, and you went through her delivery with her, and then you became the baby's primary care pediatrician until the beginning of your third year. So it was a 2-year program, and it was so freaking awesome. I can't even tell you how great that was. So that program was developed in the late 60s, and then since then, places like Duke have, redefined the timing of the information. And I said I was calling your attention to the doubling time. So between 1950 to 1985 is when the amount of knowledge that you had as a doctor doubled. Okay, so in 1950 you learned what you learned. Well, by 1985 that amount had doubled. So you then were a keeper of knowledge. It's I'm going to memorize the Krebs cycle because I'm going to use it every day in the emergency department. I am going to walk into every patient who's short of breath and identify which ATP molecule is causing their problem, right? So you were a keeper of knowledge, and I would say that many of you probably came in at the end of your faculty still thinking that you needed to memorize everything, and with that model. Well, guess what? The doubling time today is 73 days. Every 73 days, the amount of knowledge that any respectable doctor would need to know to treat their patients well is doubles in 73 days. There is no freaking way that you can relearn everything and like be that keeper of knowledge every 73 days. It's like, it's physically impossible. So we're at a crisis point. We need to do something. We need to become curators of the information, not keepers of the information. We have to know where to get it. We have to know how to process it. We have to know how, is it the integrity of the information, vetting the sources. Like, we don't go to Dr. Google. We base it on science. We have evidence-based things that we have sources. And in kind of doing this, the AMA came up with a system called the Master Adaptive Learner Model. And this is a student-driven learning model. And so you can see that all of those things in the little cogs right there. I'm just not going to read all those things because you can actually read all those things. But those are sort of the things that need to happen for someone in a successful working, learning environment. But you can have the best system possible. Like, you can buy a Lamborghini Countach, but if you don't get gas, you ain't going anywhere, right? Like, you need to have somebody there. You need to have your mechanic. You need to have your driver. So we need to have the coach, and we need to have our learners. The expectation of our learners is that they have to be curious, they have to be motivated, they have to have the right mindset to be self-driven learners, and they have to be resilient learners. So sometimes they're going to fail, and that has to be okay. These may not be the people who get 272 on step 1 of the boards. We may have to do more work to remediate their knowledge base, but we need to find out what is the best master adaptive learner that we can apply all of these new precision education concepts to, and use our competency-based medical education model to help them grow from when they step into our learning environment until they leave our learning environment, and give them the tools for lifelong learning and continuous professional development. So the curiosity part, yeah, I guess I just said all these things instead of like going through my slide there. That's okay. So the learner, what does the learner have to do? So it's a team effort. So the learner needs to be able to kind of self-assess, like, what can I do, what can't I do? They can identify that because you told them, or they can identify it because, like, every time they go to intubate somebody, they fail, right? So, I mean, like, there's a lot of sources for this knowledge. So they have to, you have to find the teachable moments and help them identify where they need to learn and what they need to do. They have to be able to learn it. And they have to find new ways of learning it and processing it and internalizing it into their way of doing things. So some of the ways that they might do this on their own, like, they might get to a place, I think the easiest example is you have to tap a knee joint and you're moonlighting and you've never done it before. And here's this person with this giant knee. Like, oops. So then what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to learn how to do it. And then you send them, then they go to the YouTube video, or they go to the Roberts and Hedges videos and learn how to do it. That's just-in-time learning. Maybe there's something like they have to come up with a treatment regimen. So maybe they go on PubMed and they look at, like, review articles or systematic reviews or something like that. The Wiki EM is kind of like an app that you can use. Like, oh my gosh, I have a person who's in adrenal crisis. What the heck do I do? And I need to decide in 30 seconds because otherwise they're dying, or something like that. So you go to an app like that that tells you just what you need to know, like MD Calc, something like that. Or maybe you want to find out a drug dose, or you go to YouTube, you go and you take a MOOC where lots of free learning resources, Khan Academy, like all these other things like this. So these are some up to date. I couldn't not mention up to date. Everybody does that instead of any of the evidence-based stuff, but whatever. So you, the educator, for your learner, you're kind of like their cruise director, right? So, there's lots of opportunities when you go on a cruise. Like you can go on a hike, you can go on a bus tour, you can stay on the ship and play shuffleboard or go to the bar, whatever. You're the cruise director and you give the opportunities. You might say to somebody, look, I noticed that you've been on the cruise ship the whole time, you've never gone on an outing, this is really beautiful, why don't we go explore today? And then the learner's the one that's going to say, no, I just like my cabin, I'm going to sit on the patio the whole time. Veranda, they call them verandas. And so as the coach or the cruise director, you help them plan, you help them learn, you model lifelong learning. So sometimes they're going to ask you a question, you don't know the answer. How do you look up the information? So who cares that you don't know the answer? Knowledge doubles every 73 days. Maybe you didn't have a need to look that up. The last time you looked it up was 74 days ago. So you can look it up together. You can help them, guide them through a reflective feedback. And you can also be kind of like their big brother, big sister person as you help them, decide what's next for them. So let's say you decide you want to do this in your learning environment. What are you going to do? Well, your next steps, you need to build a team that has passionate people and influential people. Definitely one of the people you want to have on your team is somebody who's really good at information technology. And you want to start small. You don't want to revamp the entire medical school curriculum for all 4 years. With some precision education initiative. You want to start with one course that has engaged people who want to see it succeed, and then you get buy-in from people, and you get your team to work together, and you work out the kinks before you go present it to your dean and say, I want to redo the entire preclinical curriculum tomorrow. Really, it's most of the faculty who aren't knowledgeable about these things that are the biggest challenge. So you have to do a lot of faculty development to help them understand how they can serve in this role instead of just being the Socratic method teachers or something like that. And things all have to be kind of based in the principles of AI so that, and the ethics part. You don't want to have public information because if you gather data about somebody, you want to make sure that you protect their data. So this is just kind of a beginning for this, and I'm sure that if I were invited to give this talk in 5 years, people would look at this slide and be like, really? I need a stethoscope to listen to a heart? So I think we're evolving a lot, and things are really going to happen. So just wanted to hear if you have any questions, suggestions, success stories, questions about how you can implement something related to your project or anything along those lines. I'm happy to answer any of those kinds of things. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be meeting with you today.
Thank you.
So going back to one of the slides, kind of, especially as it relates to procedural education, there's a few of us in my group that really want to move towards a mastery learning model where, if we've got an hour, some of those residents are only going to need a few minutes of that hour, but most of our attention probably needs to go to a few of the residents to really get into a mastery. How have you been able to implement something similar, and how do you get around the stigma of one resident only needs a few reps versus another resident needs more?
That's a really great question, and I'm going to challenge you to going back to planning the educational intervention itself. So if I'm just listening to what you said, then what I'm hearing, whether you intended it or not, what I'm hearing is you have an hour to teach a thing.
Yeah.
And like 3 of the residents in that hour get it in the first 30 seconds. And then they're going to be bored for the next, 59, 58 minutes or something like that. And then you're going to have most of the people who get it at the end of the hour, and you're going to have 1 or 2 stragglers who don't get it at all. And that was just their first exposure. So my challenge to you is, I'm going to tell you that that's not the proper way to teach that skill. That there's got to be another better way that you can use to teach whatever it is that you want to do. And perhaps they demonstrate mastery in the beginning, and then if you have a 1-hour time period, maybe you have more advanced things that they could be doing. Like they're checking in. Have you ever done an escape room?
Not specific, but we've done other things to try to busy the folks who have the kind of mastery of what are.
Yeah, but like busy work itself isn't helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that that's what you're doing, but you
Yeah.
just chose that word. So
Yes,
I'm
I
gonna
did.
like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna hone in on
That
that.
was a bad word for me.
It was, but that was really helpful for me. Thank you. So you want to have, if you think about the levels of learning, right, where you have like knowledge and application and mastery, all of those things. So like think about riding a bike, because it's an easy example to think of. So maybe the first example is that somebody knows that there is a bike, and maybe they can like hold the bike and they can walk along with it. And then maybe the next thing is they put their legs over and they walk along with it. And then maybe somebody else like sits on the bike and goes for like 2 pedals and then they fall. And then maybe somebody else gets on and they just ride off. And your learning objective was, what we're going to do today is we're going to learn the parts of the bike, and we're going to just like learn to walk down the road holding the bike and seeing the wheels go. And at the very end today, we're going to put our legs over and we're going to walk with the bike under, between our legs. And then you get the guy who rides off. Or you get the guy who does the, 2 steps and then he falls sort of thing. Well, maybe the next thing with that guy is you send him over to another teacher who's teaching them how to like do the riding. And when they do that, maybe you have another teacher that you send them to who's going to teach them how to do like an agility obstacle course or take them mountain biking or something like that.
Then let's say I kind of implement that model, then how do you avoid fostering negative feelings among the learners, either towards you or between each other, if ostensibly they're all, PGY2 bike riders? Mm-hmm. But one of them's getting on the track where we're talking about the parts of the bike and how to kind of make it on a flat plane, and the other one's doing the agility course.
Mm-hmm. Like if somebody had the answer to that question, then this would all be a moot point.
Sure.
So I'm going to draw a parallel to your family. Many of you have siblings, right? Many of you might have children, more than one child. And the thing about that is that each of your children or each of your brothers and sisters has different needs. So do you as a parent say, all right, everybody is going to play soccer. I don't care. We all have to be equal. We're all playing soccer. And our family is going to soccer and we're just doing that. Well, like maybe you have a future championship ice skater in your midst or something like that. And that costs a lot more money than soccer. Like, do you deny that child who's like ready for the Olympics what they need? And then the other kid is like, yeah, but mom, you spent this on them and you're spending more time with them developing their thing. It's just, this is an everyday thing. Everybody's good at something. Everybody needs work on something. And people aren't cookie cutter people. As we mentioned earlier, they come with their past experiences. They come from their environment. They come with their objective data. And it's like a stepwise process. So the reason I brought up the escape room is because you can't go to the next level of the escape room until you complete the first task. And if you build that mentality, it's like, you know what, today we're doing this, and some of you are going to spend 3 hours doing step 1, and by the time you get to step 2, you'll be out of there in 30 seconds. Whereas the person who got out of step 1 in 30 seconds might be in step 2 for 2 weeks. And it's just the expectations, and this is your coaching, and this is you like helping them identify what they need, and just setting this as the norm. And somebody's not better than somebody else, but like the reality of it is some of us are better at some things than others. And everybody is good at something. And we all don't just give out participation trophies. Like, right? I mean, and I guess I totally hear your concern. And I'm not minimizing it in any way. But I think that, you need to think about the individuals identifying what they need to know and how they need to acquire that information. It's like, okay, well, once you're able to do this, then we're going to send you here. Like, here's the level you need to be. And like, if you come in here, then you demonstrate that you know this, then you can go. But you must be here. You must not leave this room until you can be here. This is what I have to sign off on your skills. And then, you'll get up here through your career.
I do think that culturally it's really important to normalize learning differences too.
Yeah.
Like this idea that faster is better is a fallacy, right? Like what's good is getting there. Mm-hmm. And the path that we take to get there is going to be different for different skills for different people, which is hard, right? Because nobody wants to be like the slow one, but I do think that that's a really important message for our learners to hear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
How do you feel, Wendy, about you used the reading groups analogy in the beginning. How do you feel for stuff like that, sort of having some pre-testing and having people broken into groups where you expect, you can't always nail it 100%, but you think this group is only going to get this far, whereas this other group is going to get this far. Like, is that helpful? Is that more stigmatizing? How do you feel
I think that you hit the nail on the head, actually, by saying that you normalize these different speeds of learning, that, we're not racing, that if you're kind of building it as, career and professional development, that, it takes all different types of people to make a good department and to take care of patients. So, let's find out how we can make you competent in all the areas you need to be competent and help you grow in your leadership roles and in your niche. Like, maybe we get you started in your niche area a little bit sooner. My kids were in those accelerated groups, and they all knew it in first grade.
Yeah.
Those are the kids that can't read, and it's a fact of life.
Yeah.
But, if you hold back the people just so that they have to do all the things again and again and again, after they've mastered it, you're going to lose their potential to make a huge stride and make something better happen.
From a student's perspective, I just finished first year. I just had a question. So I've tried to, I've just learned what precision education truly is, but I've been trying to, I brought it up to my dean and asked lots of questions about how to move forward. I'm a pharmacist as well from the same school. Mm-hmm. And I've asked about pharmacology, and I've also asked about implementing things like up-to-date in our curriculum, and I've been kind of shut down. So how do you recommend from our perspective to actually bring that information up and present it in a way that we get success? Because it's been very unsuccessful to try and change the curriculum in small ways.
Okay, so do you have a curriculum committee?
Yes.
Are you on the curriculum committee?
No.
Do you know someone on the curriculum committee who can get you appointed to the curriculum committee?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, so there are mechanisms where these things happen in every educational setting. And, sometimes you have to do a lot of work and make something happen in a small group. You have to find maybe a key mentor who can mentor you through a particular situation, and then demonstrate that it's valuable in some way. And by valuable, I don't mean that everybody had fun.
Yeah.
or thinks that they're better at it. I mean, like truly there's some output that's better than it used to be. And yeah, so I think that it's the connections. Like you don't just go to the top and say, I
Yeah.
want this.
No, we started with, so we had a presentation about lexicon built by me and another pharmacist, brought it to the course director, and then they basically said, we're not going to talk about this at all throughout the 4 years while you're here. Because they don't teach at all about UpToDate or lexicon or any medical resources. But in the same school, the pharmacy program teaches about those resources. And we have a whole course about it, but they don't have time for it in the curriculum for the med students, even though we're going to get to the same point and be expected to know how to use those resources.
Yeah, I think, you know,
Mysterious.
working on the on a systems platform and finding out how things actually get done and people who are motivated.
So we're going to potentially the wrong person or the wrong area.
I think so.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to do a lot more reading on this because this terminology is new to me, but like you alluded to, like a lot of the concepts we're kind of doing at different levels and different stages. So I think just the framework, like the shared mental model of getting everybody on board and buy-in. But is there like a lot of existing literature in graduate medical education?
Not even close.
Okay.
I'm trying to change that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Well, it's interesting because like my residency did have the tracks. I had no, and it's something we talk about like during interviews as like a reason to come to. I had no idea it wasn't like everywhere. I had no idea.
Well, the tracks, it's one way of doing something to like give you a leg up where you can learn some of the skills that might be useful to you in your chosen career path.
For sure.
Like when one way of doing tracks is you have everybody do all the tracks and rotate, kind of like clerkships in the beginning, and then they pick which one is best for them.
Yeah.
And so that's one way of doing it. And then I think that if you frame it, this is kind of, I think, the solution to the questions that you're asking, and because we're short on time, like I'm not going to help you discover this for yourself, but just to like kind of have sort of mentors and champions and network building. So getting yourself involved in a network and building your, like we have these different areas of expertise, and like we have to sort of master all of the areas for you to graduate, but we really want you to excel in what is important to you, and we want to help you kind of, lead in the future, and so how can we help you do that? So scholarly tracks in a program, that's one way of kind of doing that, where you have a cadre of people in your program.
It's almost like a built-in mentorship and like finding somebody who's interested in what you're interested in.
Yes, exactly.
the biggest hurdle I've perceived from this so far is going to be like resources.
Yes.
Because if you use the case of like the procedural workshop, as it exists now, we're all devoting the majority of resources towards the struggling learners that need more time. So now we have to find or redivert resources to create new scenarios and bigger and better and more challenging for the learners at the other end of the spectrum.
What do you think about more advanced learners helping the struggling learners?
I think we've done some of those things as well. Like I'm going through examples in my head. We used to use the Foundations of Emergency Medicine model a lot, and when you thought that a learner got to a certain level of being able to do this on their own, then they were appointed as the leader of a scenario. Just as one example, but I think
like you can
exploring those options.
You can have it built into your residency program. So, for example, your scholarly tracks. Perhaps there is someone in the education track who wants to be nominally in charge of the skills lab for the people who are like basic learners in whatever the skill is. I mean, assuming that they're proficient in that already.
Yeah, so we'll do, like, people that do the simulation track will, like, sometimes run our morning sim for the residents. Like early, so it's almost like early on in the year, there's a little extra time training those residents, but then, like, later on in the year, once you've given them that extra, like, time that you've spent with them, then they can kind of take over increasing responsibility. So yeah, it's learners as teachers or residents as teachers kind of.
So kind of putting like the top people with the lowest, and then you can put your time with the middle group or wherever needs more time.
My concern for that though is kind of like what Jeff was saying is I feel like that learner that's struggling is going to get isolated because we've had struggling learners that end up isolated, and it's all, I know everybody's an adult learning, but everyone that sees that struggling learner, then they become a struggling learner, and then how do they recover from that? And it not only takes a confidence hit, but then their interactions with their colleagues, it isolates them and kind of starts to spiral. Because that's my concern is I could see a scenario where it's, this person scored, however you identify them as the top learner, whether it's their ITE score or their evaluations or whatever, they get matched with the struggling person, and now that power dynamic gets really weird.
The horn and halo effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, nobody said this was easy.
No.
But we were counting on you to make it easy for us.
Fix everything.
All the
today.
answers.
I mean, you're right. You have to be cognizant of all of the social implications of these things. But if you have a broad enough program, and so I'll finish that thought. If you have a broad enough program, then everybody's going to be good at something more than somebody else. So everybody will have their chance to shine. And furthermore, I think that you're rooted in the concept of the way that it is.
Sure.
And what I'm proposing here is like a nuclear bomb
Like blowing
on
up,
the way everything is done. So that if the students themselves are responsible for their mastery, and then they have to come up with how they're going to learn this and become proficient, then some of the things could be, we've identified advanced learners in this area. It's kind of like tutors. Like in, college, there's kids who get paid to tutor kids who are struggling. We've identified these people, that's one resource. Or there's this, online course, or, there's this or that. And you're responsible. And I'm giving you the feedback that you need to be able to understand that you need more of this. So you're not designing the learning. They're designing their needs, and you're helping them find ways for that to happen. So maybe you're learning, like your learning class, it has 3 tables. Right? And this table is for people who've identified that they need to brush up on the basics, and they self-assign themselves there because together with their coach, they've determined that that's an area of weakness for them. And when they go into the next room, they can be at the high learner table because they've identified it. So all of the complaints that you have right now saying this is never going to work, it's never going to work in the current structure. Ever, 100% this is never going to work. And like if we had another 3 hours, we could list all the reasons why it's not going to work, and you guys have already identified many of them. I'm saying this is a whole new way of thinking about learning, and you guys are in a position now to understand all of the learning methods. And so this is on you now to consider disruption.
And they have it in K through 12, but then they stop it at med school. Like when in K through 12, you can choose to go to an advisor and get help and go to an advanced class, but in medical school, you can't. If you think that you can pass out of the exam before taking the course, that's not even a question. You have to go to that class every single day, 4 hours a day. And same
What medical school do you go to?
I go to AZ Comp here.
Okay, but not all schools are like that.
And I mean, that's...
Right?
Yeah.
So, like...
Although a majority are.
majority
It's a really cutting edge school that's thinking differently.
Finished the same program, the same school, and I'm taking the same classes again.
Yep.
Same exact course, same professor.
Yep.
It's what it is.
And that's how it is, and that should motivate
in high
you
school,
to make
that's
change.
Not the, in college, it's not the same. It's interesting.
Motivate you to change the future when you get into a position where you are controlling that. And these guys are there right now Yeah.
Jules, I'm still struggling to be a master educator, so we have to keep going.
Perfect. All right, course back on.
Same time next month.
Okay, all right. So on that note, we have been very graciously invited to join Armed MedEd for their mentoring panel, and I don't want to walk in too late, so why don't we
Yeah, I'm
just go
sorry.
ahead and pop over there.
Yeah.
No, this was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We